All right, everybody. Looks like we're a go here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Hash Church 5.0, episode 21. Episode 21. Holy shit. How did we get to episode 21 already? Last episode of 2024, I will say we are here fastly approaching the new year. So I'm hoping we get some folks in today, as Diana just reminded me that Hemp Guy, Skunkman Sam, did not have the link for the show today. I usually send the show out every week in an email, and it sounds like I forgot to do that, which is probably why we do not have too many people in the chat or in the panel room just yet. I also can't see your cameras, guys, both Hemp Guy, and I'm guessing that's you, Dr. David.
Let's see.
Start up the machine. Start up the machine. I hear you nicely, though. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. There's Mr. Skunkman Sam. Ooh, I saw a little bit of your beard. It's always a little treat when we get a little peek, a little tiny peek of the mysterious Skunkman Sam. How you feeling this week, Sam?
I'm alive.
Well, I'm in the same boat, bro. I'm not going to complain. I
There it
quite
is.
like it. Oh, we got another iPhone coming in. Hey, Dr. David Allen, dude. How you doing?
Good morning.
Good morning. It's good to see you.
I'm proud to be here.
That's awesome. Well, you should be. You're an honored guest for sure. Johnny B coming in on the sideways with the tilted camera. Well, what's going on there, Johnny B? And you're muted. Oh my goodness. Etienne Fontan.
Good morning, John.
Good morning. How you doing, brother?
Man, there you are.
Right here.
There he
I,
is.
You're
I,
looking.
I
Oh, that was you, Johnny B. You what? You what?
oh,
Oh,
like I said, I'm just driving now. I was just talking with Ryan, and he's like, "Oh, there's the link." I'm like, "Perfect timing." So here we are. I'll be at home in like 20 minutes, and I figured, hey, it's a quick click, with the car. Just hit a
yeah,
button.
absolutely. Dr. David Allen, remember I was going to introduce you to Etienne? There's Etienne.
Good morning.
Etienne is, you guys know a lot of the same people. He's been doing the California activism thing for a very long time, and you're both good friends with Elvie.
Oh, nice.
Well, Elvie was my teacher. She was my mamacita on the tour. Uh,
Oh,
back back in '93 and '94, I got to go through 40 different, well, actually 47 different states with Elvie,
nice.
doing rallies, teach-ins, and tours. And I was a very young cannabis activist. I had just gotten out of service in the military, and I'd served in Desert Storm and sustained some injuries. And found myself as a medical cannabis patient before Proposition 215 passed. And so Elvie was kind of my guide because, she had sued the government
Yeah.
for cannabis. So she was teaching me what I could say, what I can't say, because I was just a young activist on the road. So yeah, I was a little more looser than I probably should have been with my language and everything else. So she kind of taught me to be better in my speaking as well as how to confront the police, because she was always a curiosity of the
Confronting the
police.
police.
Well, she was a curiosity because they 99.99% of the police who we ran into had no idea there was such a thing as legal weed.
What
Two,
education?
say again?
What an education you got.
Oh, it was yeah, OJT, right? On the job training all the time. So, we would go to a rally and the police were like, I smell marijuana, and they'd come over and like, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm illegal. Whips out her tin, whips out her note, and their eyes are always like, what? They've never been debriefed on how to handle a federal medical marijuana person anything, right?
All
So, I mean,
right.
No.
this is the mid 90s, early to mid 90s. So, I mean, there was no understanding of what it was. So, She was constantly having to whip out her paperwork and say, "No, I sued the government, and this is the tin, and this is what it looks like." And it just turned into a kind of a gawk fest for people because, she wasn't really known in the media, right? There wasn't a whole bunch of, whiz bang about medical cannabis back then. So it caught all the reporters in the curious line of what is going on here? Yeah, it was just always a constant struggle for people to realize the realities that they were existing in, and she challenged the dominant paradigm everywhere we went, and that
Sounds like
that
mine.
as a tool that as a tool was amazing because there's not many women who were parents who had gone blind, that had been busted in their home, that had their entire community rally behind them. And then when she sued the government and then eventually won her cannabis, I mean, she became a minor celebrity in the sense that people just didn't know how to handle cannabis in any way, shape, or form besides just let it go away. They didn't know how to consider that there was a potential legal reality to it. And the biggest thing was fascinating to watch them struggle with was they had always gone into automatic arrest mode. I mean, they would come over hands on their handcuffs, all ready to whip them out. And then to watch them not have that ability literally taken from them was absolutely fascinating to watch
Wow.
go into, play and watch them try to struggle with the legalities because you can watch the brain spinning like, okay, I'm gonna arrest her, but I can't arrest her. I can't arrest her. I can't arrest her. And to watch those series of emotions flow through their face was worth the price of admission. I mean, granted, it was free, but it was still to see the challenge going down. And last week we even talked about we went to Canada and she got kicked out of Canada because of her legal marijuana she brought
Right.
with her. But there was no Canadian law back in 93 to allow her to do that. So they just kicked her out and caused a minor, kerfuffle at the border that really went nowhere besides the Vancouver Sun. And, again, they didn't know how to handle her, so they let her go too. And, they seized her marijuana at the border, but she got the rest of her stuff back when we went back to America. So she has been just an amazing woman in the sense that she's forced to educate people every single day of her existence, practically, at least early on, because of the illegalities of cannabis. So she
Right.
challenged the local paradigm, the state paradigm, and of course, she already run the federal one. And no cop knows how to handle an actual DEA exception letter. It's got everything on it that they don't want to read. I have to let you go.
I love that.
Oh, we lost your guy.
And we lost.
Oh, he'll come back. He'll come back. It's perfect actually, your storytelling, because it'll give a nice intro into sort of who David is, what he's been up to, what he's doing, because he's also very much an activist. He was one of the first doctors to be an activist and put his
Yes.
license on the line, which back when he was doing that, there were doctors that were becoming sort of pro, but not at the same level as Dr. David Allen, he's back now, so I'll maybe get him to. I was just talking about a little bit about your story, Dr. David Allen.
Oh, nice.
And so what I was thinking of is now that you could potentially kind of give a little background as to who you are, where you come from, your history, and then what led into cannabis and some of the key things that you did in regards to, looking at cannabis prohibition, like calling all the med schools and finding out how many taught the endocannabinoid system, etc.
Okay.
So I will give
Awesome.
it up to you, sir.
Um, I'm a retired cardiovascular and thoracic surgeon. I'm double boarded in general surgery and cardiovascular science. And I used to do bypasses on people. and
Oh.
cut them open and put them on bypass pump and do operations on their heart. And I had to protect the heart from what's called reperfusion injury. And that's whenever you block blood flow to a certain organ and then for a period of time and then restore the blood flow to that organ, what happens is a bunch of free radicals are produced, which actually makes the heart attack or stroke worse. So my job was to prevent reperfusion injury. And in 2003, there was a patent produced by the Department of Health and Human Sciences called cannabinoids as antioxidants and neuroprotectants. The patent number is 6,630,507. And there's a couple versions of it. They had an updated version of it. But basically, in that patent, they proved that CBD decreases reperfusion injury on a brain infarct. And what they did was they ligated a middle cerebral artery of rats and created a stroke, and then opened the vessel and then did vivisections of the rats afterwards, and found out that the stroke size was 50% smaller, half the size, if they had CBD on board before they ligated the artery. And so this is like a miracle that any medicine would decrease the size of a stroke by any percentage at all. And since this patent proves that it decreases the size of a stroke by half, it's a miracle. Now, there's a lot of science produced, both in patents and journal articles and stuff. But the patent office is the keeper of the truth, because when you apply for a patent, you have to write out your patent, and every comma in the patent has to be exactly correct. They won't give you a patent number if anything in the patent is incorrect, and therefore the patent office is the keeper of the truth. You can't argue with something that's in a patent. So that's the basis to start, because the anti-cannabis thing is strong, and they try to refute any kind of information you have that says cannabis is good for you. And so if you want the truth, you want to look in patents. And so the internet's hard to use now. It's much harder to use than it was 15 years ago. And you can hide stuff on the internet. And a lot of the cannabis science is hidden in the internet because these patents are extremely hard to read, and the majority of people don't have the educational background to understand what they're reading. And so many of the implications of what these patents tell us are hidden from the public. And so if you go on YouTube, there's a lot of people producing cannabis stuff, and almost none of it has to do with scientific articles or patents. So if you look up on YouTube cannabis as antioxidants and neuroprotectants, you won't find anything at all. And nowhere on YouTube will you find out the information that it's proven by a patent that it decreases the size of a stroke by 50% if you have CBD on board prior to ligating the artery on the rats. Now this study has never been done in humans, which is a crime, because This patent came out in 2003. And as soon as I read it, as a heart surgeon, I knew the implications meant that at some point in the future, when you were doing heart surgery, you would turn to the anesthesiologist, and right before you came off a bypass, you would tell the anesthesiologist, give the CBD and go off bypass to prevent reperfusion injury after your heart procedure that you just did.
So here's a question, Dr. David. Is this the sort of beginning of you going, I don't want to say rogue on the medical system, but there was a point where you sort of jumped off the tracks and you realized the importance of cannabis and you basically were willing to put everything on the line for it. Can you tell a little bit of that story, the sort of history of your history with the DEA and all of the shit that went down with you in how, because one day you're a heart surgeon and you're respected and you're doing surgeries on people, and then the next you're a cannabis maniac activist that is being arrested and having his home taken and all of that. Can you give the audience a little bit of a background on that story?
It's a complex story, and someday I'm going to have a movie or book written about this. But if you have money, everybody's trying to get your money. That's the bottom line. And so we had a heart surgery program here, and we were doing about 125 cases a year at this one heart hospital. Okay. And one of the heart surgeons left, and I was there by myself and doing heart surgery. And I had the best mortality morbidity in the state of Mississippi. And so the hospital was trying to steal money from the retirements things for hospital employees, and they wanted to confuse the issue, and they obfuscated by stealing that money and starting a unnecessary second heart program at our sister hospital, which was about 45 minutes away. And I knew this was bad news, and and to do that, they wanted to close the cardiac surgical ICU, which was expensive. And they wanted me to recover my heart surgery patients in general surgery ICU, which was unacceptable to us because nurses in that area would take care of patients with bowel infection wounds and all kinds of stuff. And they weren't trained with special equipment that we used for heart patients. Swan gas catheters, and balloon pumps, and a bunch of other stuff. And so we objected to that. And so I was in the way of them closing the ICU at Singing River Hospital and opening an unneeded heart program at Ocean Springs. And I actually did the first heart surgeries done at Ocean Springs. So I opened that heart program, but they had to get rid of me because I was opposing the closure of this other ICU, and they were busy stealing employees' retirement money. And so they decided to take my hospital privileges away for no reason. And they offered me $150,000 if I would agree to leave and not sue them. And so I took that money and I paid off my property, the Blue Hole. And so I own this property. And I did that specifically because I was in Texarkana, and there was 3 heart surgeons there, and they had well-established places, and they were run out of town. And I knew about hospitals running surgeons out of town. So, and it's hard to get a heart position. And there's anyway, so I figured that it would be almost impossible to start another heart program somewhere else. So I decided I had some extra money. So I bought a bunch of books on cannabis and a bunch of videos and stuff. And I started teaching myself about this science, about the endocannabinoid system. And I like to call it the endocannabinoid signaling system because that actually hints at the function of this because it's a communication system that cells have that is used to regulate all of physiology. And so I started learning about this, and I thought, well, I got to do something else. I can't do operations here in Pascagoula, Mississippi. So I need to pick a different path. So I got a California medical license, and I went out to California and I started doing cannabis exams. And I, while I had my practice in Sacramento, I called 157 medical schools in the United States. And at first I called them and I'd say, hey, I'd like to speak to the director of the curriculum. And they'd say, who's this? And I'd say, this is Dr. Allen. And they'd say, well, what do you want? And I would say, well, I want to ask if they teach this science. And then they would like stonewall me. So I had some people working for me. So we changed our tax a little bit, and I had them act like they were medical students looking for a medical school to go to, and they would take notes on their conversations and stuff, and they would call up and and they would say all kinds of really racist and ignorant comments about, well, why would you want to study that? We don't do that here. You don't need to come to our school if you want to study that. Kind of results. And anyway, so I found out we called 157 medical schools and found out that only 13% of them actually even mention the endocannabinoid signaling or endocannabinoid system. And nobody has organized courses or a department or anything, and only 13% even mention it in ancillary courses like pharmacology, neuroanatomy, or any other science. And so we proved basically that doctors are not taught this regulatory system that regulates all of metabolism. And so I don't know. One of my epiphanies was that I know metabolism, and I noticed that the brain and nervous tissue has the highest concentration of CB1 receptors. And most cannabis activists, if you ask them that, where are CB1 and CB2 receptors, they'll tell you. But if you ask them, why are CB1 receptors located in the nervous tissue, they won't know. And I think I know because I have some dictums in my life. And one of Dr. Allen's dictums is there's no such thing as a coincidence. And so why is CB1 receptors located in nervous tissue, and the brain basically burns sugar as a primary metabolite. So if your glucose drops below 60, you pass out because you can't maintain consciousness if your glucose is less than a certain number. So now all the other tissues in the body, the heart, the lungs, the muscles, they burn glucose a little bit, but they mostly burn fatty metabolites, ketones, and glucagon and a bunch of other stuff. But the brain burns glucose, and there's CB1 receptors, or more CB1 receptors in the brain tissue than anywhere else. I don't think it's a coincidence that all the CB1 receptors are in the brain tissue and it burns sugar. Now, CB1 receptors are also located on the mitochondrial membrane and the nuclear membrane, as well as the cytoplasm membrane. So CB1 receptors are more numerous than any other receptors. So this is a new science that they have actually banned by law. And so this is one of the only sciences that has actually been banned by law. And we should be way ahead of ourselves right now, but we're not because of this. And So a lot of this information is hidden on the internet by scientific jargon that most people can't comprehend. And so what we need to do is we need to an interpreter that can interpret scientific jargon into everyday language that most people can understand, and let people know the implications of what this scientific literature means. And so by doing that, we will expand the knowledge of the cannabis sciences, and and so once a person learns that there's a patent that you can make cannabis oil water soluble. So you can make an oil water soluble, which means now currently you can't stick a needle in somebody's vein and inject cannabis oil because it'd cause a stroke, right? So if you made it water soluble, you could put it in an IV bag, and when the ambulance came to pick up a patient, they could start an IV of CBD for a number of different troubles. I'm getting a phone call, and I'm sorry. I
Well, I
don't
was
know.
wondering why your phone was flickering. I was like, whoa, that was
I'm
like a
trying to.
little flickering.
I tried to turn it off last time, and it cut me off from this, so I just left it. But
Yeah.
anyway, so uh, here's what I want to do, and this will be a money making business. And here's what I learned: if you want to be successful, surround yourself by knowledgeable people. So hang out with Elvie Musica, hang out with uh, Robert Melamede and other people, Marcus Gary Richardson, and other people that know what's going on, and you can be successful. And so here's the idea. We want to I want to start a group of people that can bring their talents together and produce a business for YouTube. Okay, now YouTube is currently making a lot of money for a bunch of different people doing content, and the more content you can produce, the more money you can make. And
14 billion a month, Dr. David. 14 billion a month is what YouTube brings in for monetization on ad revenue right now.
so I could do this myself, but I don't have the technical expertise. So I want other, and I don't have the money to do this. So here's my proposition. I want to get a group of dedicated people that know about this science. And what we want to do is start a YouTube channel, Cannabis Journal Club. And what we will do is we will review scientific articles in journals and patents and give a super short, condensed evaluation of a patent or an article, and let people know the implications. So we would want to shoot for um, short titles of these subjects, and straight, no nonsense, directly talk about exactly what the title is and explain its significance, and short attention span kind of stuff. So and I have a couple big binders of cannabis scientific articles and patents, and this stuff is all 15 years old. And so what we would do is we would go through, for instance, the U.S. patent, cannabinoids as antioxidants and neuroprotectants, patent number 6,630,507. And in this patent, hidden in the writing is it talks about the mechanism of action of how CBD stops reperfusion injury, and on under in vivo rat studies, example 7, it says it goes through the procedure how they ligated the middle cerebral artery and let it go, and then they did sections of the brains, and it says in here the data shows the infarct size was approximately halved in the animals treated with cannabidiol. Now, you go on YouTube, there's nothing about that on YouTube anywhere. And this is a miracle. 50% reduction in a stroke size is the difference between whether your grandma can wipe her ass or not after the stroke.
Mm.
And it's hard to, you know, I have personal experience. Donna Corby had a stroke and was in Oroville Hospital. And we would go visit her. And she would be all lethargic and tilted off to one side and not communicative at all. And one day I snuck her 0.2 of 1 cc of cannabis oil under her tongue in a syringe. And actually, they caught me. And I got out of the situation, and they put a sitter in there to watch to make sure the family didn't give the patient any kind of stuff. And it didn't matter to me because I was bold and I knew what I was doing. And I would just insinuate myself between the person that was watching the patient and the patient. And I would just put my body in between her and quickly give her 0.2 of a cc of cannabis oil. And every single time I did it, within 5 minutes, she would be alert, she would talk to us, and she would eat every single time. And I know cannabis oil, I feel it in my bones, has great efficacy against all kinds of diseases because cannabis controls what you metabolize, whether you're metabolizing glucose or fats. And so all cancers have to basically use glucose as a primary source, because when they're dividing cells fast, they have to use sugar because it provides the most energy fastest. And so, and that's the basis of a PET scan. I don't know if you guys are familiar with PET scans. So they take glucose and they tag it with radioactive tags, and they inject it in your veins, and it goes all around your body. And if any tissue burns glucose, what happened is it'll leave the radioactive tag wherever it's burning the glucose the most. And what happens is the tumors that are burning glucose light up with radioactive hotspots on the PET scan. It's anyway. So that's the basis of metabolism of cancer. So all cancers have to use glucose. They also use glutamine. So don't use monosodium glutamate, MSG, on your food because it feed cancers. And so anyway, that's my idea about Cannabis Journal Club. And so we would need to hire somebody that knows how to manipulate YouTube and TikTok and get the most money.
Well, I think
And
we have that organized. I think we don't need to start a
right,
channel. We're going to do it on my channel because the problem with monetizing on YouTube is you have to earn it, and it can take years. And so I've done that. I've gotten the 100,000 followers and the 5 million views and the this, that, and the other thing. So we can do it. I've already created a membership for the Cannabis Journal Club. It's $5 per show, 4 shows a week. We'll start in the new year. I've got a nice list of people that we made together, you and myself, Dr. David Allen, and we haven't reached out to these people. We're hoping that some of them are going to be down to obviously Skunkman Sam and Ryan Lee. You guys would be at the top of that list. We've got Donald Abrams and Dr. Ethan Russo and Dr. Amanda Ryman. I put Dr. Christina Sanchez on there and Dr. Guzman.
Perfect.
You've got El Soli's number that you put down, Dr. Philip Denny. There's a whole variety of people. I just love the idea of the concept being simple, not overly long. You know, your expertise in actual experience. By the way, while you were talking, there's people in the chat. Special to the D said he's a hemorrhagic stroke survivor. He has never heard this information. And then we had some other folks mentioning, you know, my mom had a stroke and she was basically recovered from her first stroke before the ambulance got there after giving her extra dose of Fico. Another person said that after they had their stroke, it was cannabis oil that managed to get them walking again. So there's all sorts of experiences. I had a stroke at 47 years old. Cannabis oil is what got me walking again. That was from Kit Russell. So there's lots of people
Yeah.
relating to what you're saying right now.
So we're going to save human lives by doing this. So that's
You know
how.
what? I didn't understand the implications. I will be honest, when you first asked me if we could do this together, and I was kind of like, I love your information and you as a person, and I've always looked up to you in a sense that I like what you're about, and I like that you've taken this knowledge and you put it on the line, and you just, there wasn't that many people from the medical establishment who was on the other side of the activism with us, and you were one of the very few that was literally putting their money where their mouth was. And yeah, I just think it's a really cool idea. I'm excited to get it going with you. And like I said, I've seen Hash Church from the conversations we've had about, when we did the rosin episode and all of a sudden it was like machine start. I've seen Hash Church steer parts of the community and the
You
industry,
have no one
but I,
else has.
but I never thought of it at this level to be able to steer. I mean, I should have, because it's what we've all been doing there's not a person on this panel that hasn't helped someone with their cancer or their, somewhat terminal disease with the use of cannabis. Yet at the same time, the medical establishment has always been created to make us feel, inferior in the knowledge that we
Exactly.
hold. Yeah,
Yeah,
who wants to listen to us? Are you a doctor? Is always the
we're
first thing
lazy.
out of their mouth.
That's right. Well, I wanted to I had a couple other things I wanted to talk to you about, these
Please.
patent stuff. So, so this is a patent that says therapeutic uses of cannabidiol compounds, and in this, it proves you can't argue with this. It proves 66% reduction in infarct size of the heart. And this patent proves decrease the size of an infarct, a myocardial infarction, by 66%. And that's not national news. Okay. Here's one: antibacterial cannabinoids from cannabis sativa. Here's one. All right. I have an article here where they feed cows hemp and they harvest the meat and the milk with CBD in it. I have a patent on how to intentionally pollinate indoor marijuana crops. There's a U.S. patent on that.
Like people can see these patents. I mean, I've seen some of them myself, and I'm not afraid to say that there's a lack of understanding You know what I mean? When you see something that suggests a 50% reduction in stroke after a special type of ligation, I don't even know what that means. But from your perspective, you're thinking, holy shit, this is like a miracle. And you want to
Exactly.
scream it from the mountaintops, but other people are just like dismissing it?
Yeah, they cause a stroke is what they do. They cut off the blood supply to the brain and they cause a stroke. And if they've pre-treated the animals with CBD,
Right.
that have less damage to the brain. I think that there's a pathway that actually works through glutamate, if I'm not mistaken. I remember looking into this when I was in university. I think the stroke causes doesn't it cause some kind of cascade of glutamic acid?
I
And
think so. Right.
yeah,
Well, there's patents on how it decreases the incidence of diabetes by 66%. Now here's a really good one. CBD inhibits vascular endothelial growth factor. Now, people don't know what that means. Vascular endothelial growth factor, VEGF. Okay, VEGF is a signaling protein which your body makes whenever there's a low blood flow in your foot or your brain or anywhere. The tissues secrete this signaling protein, which causes capillaries to grow into the area of low oxygen concentration. This VEGF causes the ingrowth of blood vessels, and actually brain tumors, especially gliomas, secrete VEGF, and it causes blood vessels to grow into the brain tumor, and the brain tumor steals blood from the human and gets bigger on its own because it's got its own blood supply now. So VEGF is a really important signaling hormone. And I wrote an article years ago about the potential of keeping stents open because, and there is a U.S. patent on coating stents with CBD, putting CBD on the stents. And what happens is the CBD inhibits vascular endothelial growth factor, which would inhibit blood flow into the area where the stent is. And stents, what happens is over time, a stent loses its lumen because the endothelium uh, expands and occludes the inside of the stent. And so if you inhibit VEGF, my article predicted that cannabis CBD would inhibit in-stent restenosis and make stents last longer. I wrote that article about 15 years ago. And there's all kinds of uses of cannabis. Now, Dr. Guzman, here's a new idea I came up with. Now, this is a cockamamie idea that's never been talked about ever before this time right now. And Dr. Guzman injected cannabis CBD in the middle of glioma tumors inside the brain. And to do this, you got to do an operation where you drill holes in the skull, and under imaging, you put a needle right in the center of the tumor and injected CBD. And he found out that tumors that were injected with CBD went away. So now, here's the problem. To do that, you have to have expensive imaging equipment that the hospital controls, and they're not just going to let any cockamamie guy with a crazy idea injecting oil into patients. because oil is not water soluble, and so here's my crazy idea, and it's never been done before. So if the problem is you can't use imaging equipment to put cannabis oil in the center of a tumor, what's the next best thing that you can do? And so I would say probably oral ingestion and stuff. So I have a friend that has a tumor on the side of his neck the size of a baseball. It's a squamous cell carcinoma. And they did a PET scan on him, and it lights up on his neck, and it also lights up on the base of his tongue. So the cancer has eroded into his tongue, and it's a big thing, and it's real close to the carotid artery and jugular vein. And so you wouldn't want to willy-nilly stick cannabis oil into this thing in the side of his neck, because you might inject it in the vein and cause a stroke or something. And then nobody knows what happens. Nobody has ever done intradermal injections of oil. And so I think it would be pretty easy to test this for safety, because you could take, the first thing would be figure out what size needle you need to that oil can go through easily, and what temperature the oil should be so it would flow properly through the needle. And then so my suggestion is to like try it on your arm and inject the smallest aliquot of CBD oil under your skin, and watch for the results. So cannabis oil should be sterile, shouldn't have any bacteria, viruses, or fungus in it. And if you just did it on your forearm, you could watch it for complications. And so I don't think it could start an immune reaction, but since it's not a protein, it's not going to be cellular immunity. And so you could watch this and see what kind of adverse effect you could have of injecting oil in your under the skin. And so in this, my friend's desperate situation, I think that if it was me, I would consider injecting CBD oil under the skin in the periphery around the tumor and photograph the results. So I've never discussed this with anybody else, and this is like a cockamamie idea, I understand, but what else are you going to do if you got a squamous cell carcinoma sitting on your carotid artery?
I have a question. When you shoot it into the brain, can you use a hemisucate to deliver the CBD without a problem?
Well, you can't shoot it in the vein because oil doesn't mix with, is not soluble in water.
Well, we use that to deliver it into the eye because it acts as a little micro. The CBD goes inside of the protective little semi-sucate delivery system.
All right, so you're talking about liposomes basically. So I have some experience with that. And I was a biochemistry major, and we made liposomes with Demerol inside them and injected it in rats. And what happens is if you take oil and mix it with water and shake it up, the oil forms a bilayer with water inside and water on the outside, because the oil has polar heads and nonpolar tails. And so the nonpolar tails hide on the inside in a bubble, basically. microsphere or liposome. And so you could put, say, if you wanted to have a cancer drug that you wanted to deliver to cancer, what you do is this: you could take some oil and take take the the medicine that you were going to deliver and shake it up and form these microspheres or liposomes that would have the chemical that you want to deliver to a particular cell. So you could take a cancer, grind it up, make antibodies against the cancer, attach it to the liposomes, and inject it into the body. And the liposomes would float around. And if the antibodies attached to the antigen, they would attach the liposome to the cancer cells preferentially, and then the liposomes would bind with the cell membrane of the cancer cells and deliver the medicine directly to the cancer cells individually.
Dr. El Sole used it to deliver uh, cannabinoids in a suppository, and we used it to deliver uh, uh, an anandamide analog that we delivered inside the eye to control glaucoma.
Wow.
Pretty
So we're
incredible.
see of this science, and it's going to expand from here dramatically. And they won't be able to say that, oh, you're just smoking pot because you want to get high, because there will be proof positive that cannabis does help, and it helps with a multitude of diseases, because it's kind of like it's the key that goes to the ignition, and the radio doesn't work in the car unless you got the key to the ignition.
Uh,
And that's
uh, Another question. Did you ever talk to Raphael Mechoulam at Jerusalem University?
I know of him, of course, but I never spoke with him. But
Because he was doing quite similar things with children and with all kinds of patients with CBD and CBD analogs also.
I've mentioned this once on church before, but I was working for a while with Dr. Brent Reynolds. He was involved in our Jamaican project, and then I was working on another project with him. He was working at the University of Miami in the neurosurgery department, and Dr. Brent's claim to fame is that he discovered stem cells in the brain in the late 80s in his thesis. Prior to that, stem cells hadn't been he changed stem cell science completely.
right,
After 30 plus years of that, he started working on something called exosomes, which are basically extracellular vesicles that are released by all cells. And they carry like proteins and lipids and DNA and RNA and other components. And he found, which blew my mind, when he created exosomes from hemp, that the exosomes contained cannabinoids. And so they started using these exosomes at the university to figure out if they could deliver drugs to the brain, because obviously that barrier between the brain is hard to get things delivered into the brain. And so they were using I can't remember what they loaded up the first exosomes with, but it was for when you get when you bang your head really hard and like on the football field or on the you get a
yeah,
concussion. It was for the reduction of inflammation in the brain for concussions, and it was insane. It reduced it by 90%, and the payload to the brain was a 45x from anything they've ever seen. A 45 time payload was delivered to the brain through these exosomes because they're just like 40. I don't know how, I think they can go up to 100 and something, 120 or 130 nanometers in diameter, but they're usually between like 40 and 100. They can travel through this brain barrier and deliver this massive payload. And I'm just wondering if what you're talking about, in particular for tumors, you know, rather than go the injection route, but you go the sort of newer, sort of less evasive method, which is to load these exosomes up with cannabinoids and deliver them directly to the brain. Might be a good,
Right.
interesting conversation for the Cannabis Journal Club in the future. We can invite Dr. Brent Reynolds and you guys can have a discussion about it.
Love to. But there's
Yeah.
there's
Also
so much.
discuss with Dr. El Sole his delivery of cannabinoids with sugars to deliver it into the body
Right.
Mm,
as a suppository.
Right.
he's on the list. He's absolutely on the list. Well, that's a nice light way to start Hash Church off for our first hour.
Yeah.
9 a.m. People are like, holy fuck, I feel like I'm at university right now.
This is the before the dabs section of
Oh,
church.
totally. Yeah, I haven't even had a dab. You're right, dude. Fuck, this is definitely like pay attention to level stuff. I know you love it, Ryan. And I'm not sure if Ryan and Dr. David Allen have met before, but you're both brilliant and you guys should definitely both know each other. Ryan's a scientist as well, Dr. David Allen, and a breeder and a student of Skunkman Sam, and just an all-around super knowledgeable guy. So there'll be yeah,
Much
another
respect.
great
Yeah.
person to link you up with.
Nice to meet you.
So we want to let the public know that there's a patent treating or preventing diabetes with cannabidiol. Nobody knows that there's a patent on treating diabetes with cannabidiol. And it proves in there it decreases uh, incidence of diabetes by 64%.
That's huge. I don't think people even realize the ramifications of diabetes on the medical system. And even now they're finding, I mean, I don't know if it was Huberman or who, or maybe it was the guy that Dana White from the UFC goes to, Brecka, Gary Brecka. I think he was the one that mentioned that most of the world calls dementia and Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. It's only in North America that they call it dementia and Alzheimer's, but the rest of the world just calls it type 3 diabetes, which is crazy when you think of like the implications
Oh,
that diabetes can have on your body if left
right,
unchecked.
right.
Dr. Allen, is that for type 1 or type 2 diabetes?
It's probably for type 2.
Okay, that's what I would suspect. Yeah, because I'm diabetic and my body produces zero insulin. And yeah,
And so people don't know why that is either. And another dictum of Dr. Allen is everything you hear and read is a lie. And if you just follow the money, that's to tell you where part of the lie is. And
well, I think I understand why. I caught a virus. My immune system destroyed the virus, and then it attacked my Isles of Langham on my pancreas and destroyed all of them.
destroyed the beta cells. That's right. So one big lie that we're living through is seed oils, I believe, are causing diabetes. And they also cause macular degeneration. So they're causing blindness. And so these seed oils are unstable even when you don't heat them, but they're really unstable when you heat them.
And
Especially,
does that include hemp seed oil?
I don't know. I can't say. So, in a lot of
I can say this about hemp seed oil compared to most of the seed oils. It does have a much higher smoke rate. So when it like the temperature that you have to bring it up to is much higher
the
than like olive
question
oil
you
and some.
ask though about that is there linoleic acid in hemp seed oil? And
Yes.
so linoleic acid is how they make linoleum. So when you heat this oil, it turns into a plastic. So when you eat French fries and corn chips and all that other stuff, you're actually eating plastic because it's not real food.
Well, it seems
I
like the world is waking up to the dangers of
I
seed oils, that's for sure.
Right.
well, I've taken hemp seed oil an awful lot, and as long as it's fresh, I don't see a problem with it. But it does go off very fast and turns basically into varnish.
Right.
Turpentine.
So you just got to be careful because any company that makes a product, they're interested in selling the product, and after it's sold, they could care less what happens to it. So all the people are making uh, perfumes and colognes and stuff, they make it because it smells good, and they don't test it to see if it causes leukemia or something else, because that's not in their interest. And so any company selling any product, you got to be careful because they have one motive, and it's not your health.
And linoleic acid is omega-6, right?
I don't know for sure.
It is. It definitely is.
Yeah, linoleic and what's the omega-3 is
Linolenic and linoleic. Yeah.
linolenic, yeah. It's
Um,
confusing.
but yeah, so it's all products that have that. I think those things are also critically important. So it's having the right balance of them, right?
Right.
And then how they're treated in processing. So
Well,
That's a big one.
it actually, some of these oils, the plastics that they perform, they actually push out other oils that are in your brain that your brain needs. So they displace normal functioning cellular stuff. So it's like having a bunch of trash inside your cell.
Well, you can see it in the health of the people in today's day and age, right? Like
Yeah.
health is crumbling for a lot of people.
All right.
yeah, we're absorbing so much plastics. I mean, people are saying, "Oh, it's something in the environment." It's like now we're doing all these studies of microplastics and finding it in everywhere,
Yeah.
right? I saw a study saying that every testicle that they've looked for, every human testicle they've looked for plastic in it, they found it,
Yeah.
microplastic.
Microplastics and all kinds of
Yeah.
stuff.
So I don't know. I always think of that when it's like you're unwrapping a package or a food, some kind of food. We used to have, I remember like when I was a kid, you go to the grocery store, there was nothing came in plastic, right? Like produce came in these big boxes that they'd unload onto the counter. And now, especially in Holland, I remember being in Holland this year and going to the grocery store with Sam, and it's like every single individual, piece of fruit or vegetable is wrapped in its own plastic layer, and all that
Yeah,
stuff
well, the first
ends
thing
up
I
in the
remember
environment.
was cellophane,
Yeah,
and that I think is pretty innocuous.
yeah, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. We gotta stop you. Yeah, I actually saw there's a Japanese group that's just developed a type of plastic that as soon as it hits seawater, it starts to dissolve.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
Yeah, there's
So it's nice that we're making some progress, but man, yeah, we're in what we call the Anthropocene right now, right? Like the geological time period that's denoted by the existence of man and the way that we know that the existence of, in the future, they'll be able to, when we're long gone, they'll be able to see that layer of plastic that's in the earth
They,
every.
they, Ryan, they've also found uh, ways to dissolve plastic. It acts as a feed source for certain microbes. And
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
yes.
they're engineering microbes now to do
yeah,
exactly
exactly.
that, right? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
amazing.
I
And that's
wouldn't be
what
surprised if there was natural fungi on the planet that could do it quite efficiently as well. It's just a matter of discovering it.
yeah,
All
well, it's
right.
like oil,
Here's
right?
another article I wanted to touch on briefly that has pretty good importance. Um, it's called Sexual Differences in the Effects of Marijuana on Stimulated Driving Performance. This is an NIH study. And what they did was they took men and women and they let them smoke pot, and they put them on a driving simulator, and they would have like dogs run out in front of them. And they would test their reactions, and their crash avoidance and this and that. And they would test them before they used cannabis and after they used cannabis and measure the results. And women, it actually didn't matter. It didn't change any statistic, which is actually interesting in itself. But men had 1.1 seconds faster reaction time and 3 times better crash avoidance. And this is a government study, NIH study, because one of the arguments that the pot haters do is, oh, well, you can't have people smoke pot because they'll be crashing everywhere, right? Well, now this is just one study, and it's not all encompassing, but this study seems to prove that if you smoke pot, you're actually a safer driver after you smoke than before. And the argument is, well, cannabis causes schizophrenia too, right? Well, the incidence of schizophrenia has been stable over 150 years, and it's about 0.1% of all populations, all races. And cannabis use has dramatically increased since the 30s. And if that was the cause of schizophrenia, then there should be a lot more schizophrenics after cannabis use increase, and there hasn't been. So it's bullshit that cannabis causes schizophrenia. And it's bullshit that cannabis makes you a worse driver.
That's true. That is definitely true, but there is a correlation between schizophrenia and cannabis use. I mean, even like even I studied neuroscience in my undergrad, and there was like if they do spinal taps, they analyze the spinal fluid of people that have schizophrenia, they have a higher turnover of endocannabinoids. So there is something going on in people with schizophrenia, or maybe people
Yeah.
that are predisposed to schizophrenia with cannabis use, some kind of comorbidity there.
Is that correlation or causality?
Well, it's not causality, 100% it's not causality.
Right.
That's why I started off with saying it's 100% true what you said. But there is some interesting link there between the two, whether it and I've seen it, like I've seen friends that used a lot of cannabis and actually went to a very not good place, believing that there was like they were covering the walls with or the light switches with tinfoil and like all sorts of bizarre behavior. People were coming in the windows and
I had a roommate, only one roommate in my entire life. We called him Microwave. And we called him Microwave because years ago when he was on acid and he was with my friend Dave Esau, and they were like, they decided they would climb the electric pole so they could see further. They were waiting for friends to show up, even though it was the prairies and you can see for 100 miles just standing on the ground. They decided in their acid-rich minds that they would climb the pole. And so Dave climbed up the pole, and then it arced into his leg and was just like firing, like, I don't know, like 5 times the amount that they give the people in the electric chair for the death penalty. And so Microwave, Jason, was watching this happen while he was tripping on acid and was like, I gotta go save him. So he climbed up the pole, burnt all the skin off of his arms and face, put Dave over his shoulder, came
Oh my,
back down and saved Dave's life, and got the nickname Microwave. He was definitely bipolar, schizophrenic. He had something going on. He was my roommate that ordered the spores from Terrence McKenna's wife back in the day, Kat, the syzygy, and we grew mushrooms together, and we had psychedelic experiences together. And he was the first person I ever saw who cannabis was truly not good for. His abuse of cannabis just took him down a darker and darker and darker path, to the point where it was so dark. And this was very early for me. This was like in the early 90s. So I was just becoming a cannabis activist, but I saw it very early on that this guy, either he was using too much of it and he would smoke. And it's funny because I've seen people, when I first met John Burfello, he smoked cannabis in a similar way as my buddy Jason did. Just like it's super intense. Now with John, it wasn't schizophrenia, it was intense pain, like a pain that I had no idea that people could be in pain like that. I had no idea that you could get to a point like that. But John was one of the first people for pain. I mean, this guy was smoking hot dabs like crack, like 900-degree dabs, smashing them, smashing them, smashing them. And I was kind of, and originally I was kind of like, a little bit judgmental. Oh, that's a bit harsh. But then as I got to know John and realized, no, this is like helping him get up. Now, he doesn't smoke quite the same way today. He takes care of himself. He lost 100 pounds. I can't imagine the extra 100 pounds that you had on you, John, was helpful for your health in regards to the pain that you were in. But all of those things, eating better, taking better care of yourself, and regulating even the way you smoke cannabis, you seem so much healthier today than you did when I met you, about 10 or 12 years ago.
Oh, it's been what? Yeah, it's over 12 years, about 12 years. So, I mean, it's definitely been an impact in my life. And I was just looking back when it's great to see you, David Allen and Dr. Allen. Like we were talking back in 2014, I was looking at some of our old messages and learning this whole system and understanding it and understanding how cannabis was just more than just a medicine. It helped me every day. It gave me functions and learning how to use CBD was huge for me. And dabbing at 710 got rid of the pain and understanding all of that. And then my health was huge too. I mean, that's a big thing, right? It's like, I mean, it comes down to your health. It's those daily routines. It's holistic health, natural healing, cannabinoid therapy. That's what this is all
I
about.
see it in your face.
It's so great to see you. It's so great. I mean, I was just, you made me such a big smile. Like, it's really from farmer to freedom. That's why I put the book back up. It's from farmer to freedom and understanding that there's a lot of things there with cannabis that you can use in so many different ways. And it's not about the heavy dosing. And sometimes I used to eat 1,000 milligrams. Now I'm gummies at 25s. They're fine, right? Depending on where you are. My pain has dramatically changed though from when I was first in a lot of pain to where I am now because I'm able to control it by understanding that, it's something that you have to understand and deal with, and you can use cannabis in order to alleviate certain symptoms and stuff like that. And there's different ways of utilizing it now today. We have creams. There's so much stuff in the Canadian industry, legal industry right now. It's like you can get whatever you want. Whatever you want. We talked about this. I can't believe it actually happened now. We're actually living it now. And then seeing where we are today and where this whole system's going and with the education that we're putting together, all of us putting things together to actually tremendously educate the world on the endocannabinoid system, like you keep saying. It's a signaling system that is needed, and we're seeing it more and more. And they've been hiding it. We talked about this years ago. They keep hiding it. Now we can start bringing it more and more to light. This has been there for years and years, and bringing it more to light is what we all get to do here today. So keep sharing this. Make sure you hit share on this today, right? You got to get the information
Right.
on.
Yes, if there's a link to this discussion, please send it to us.
Oh, 100%. I mean,
I was at the meeting in Quebec back in, I don't know, it was around 96 or 97, when Alwyn Hewitt announced the discovery of the endocannabinoid system.
Yeah, or the receptor, yeah.
That's
and
epic.
a lot of people in the chat are asking. So it's all about physiology. It's about state and change and that focus. And that's what we do here. So I do 20 push-ups every 2 hours. I started with two.
Wow.
Right. So that's what I do. I every morning at the top of the stairs, I do 33 push-ups this morning. I do morning walks every morning. The first thing I do when I get out of bed is I say, I'll be outstanding. Today's be successful day. I'm gonna learn something new. And I go on a morning walk. Come back, I do my rep right here, right? Because that gets me going so I can focus because I need that at that point, right? And then I do my push-ups every 2 hours. And I'm constantly surrounded by pipes. This is what helps me. And I
Wow.
exponentially around my businesses and everything. And I just do little dabs. Thank you, Ryan, for the little torch and the little thing. So now it's even easier to kind of alleviate certain things to keep me focused. Cannabis keeps me focused.
Yeah.
I'm coming to your house and cleaning your bong. That is what I'm doing, dude. I will do that for you, Johnny B. No judgment whatsoever, but I am coming to your house to clean your bong. I'm gonna clean that fucking bong. There's gonna be a before and after picture, and it is gonna be nothing shy of epic. Yeah, show that bad boy.
Mine too. As you can see, I'm not the cleanest dog in town.
Dude, yours looks like a hospital compared to Johnny B's. What the fuck are you talking about?
It's surprising to see. It's surprising to see Sam's like that because one of his sayings is that cleanliness is what is
Is
it?
next
And
to
it's
godliness.
No, no, isn't it? Stoneliness is next to godliness. No.
Right.
this information and that's been hiding and being there because it's been around for such a long time. It's really is getting it out there now. Like it's going to be like $100 billion industry by 2030. It's tremendously changing, and they're trying to make it as a recreational drug. The education on the cannabinoid system and what it can do for the medical system is like we got to get out of the wrecking.
Well, let me ask, does anybody have any opinions or suggestions about subdermal injection of cannabis oil?
I'm gonna pay it. I'm gonna
It's
create
never been done before.
Yeah, I mean, I see the first problem is we have done testing of oils and they are contaminated. They're not sterile, right? So it would be, or a lot of them are. So it would be you'd want to be finding an actual a sterilized dose, and maybe that would even be something that was like e-beamed. I think it would be really interesting if you were able to share that patent on the water solubility because that's actually really um, that could actually help in that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, you'd want to have like little e-beamed aliquots or something like that before people start injecting that stuff in.
Yeah, they found some pretty nasty stuff in oils over the years for sure. I remember the BHO E. coli outbreak there where they were just finding E. coli in some labs BHO, and I guess the fucking guy who was making it was just going to the bathroom and not washing his hands or something, and just the
Yeah.
slight it's microscopic, right? It's the tiniest amount. It's like you don't want to be
You gotta wash your
injecting
hands.
yourself with that.
Well, and that's the thing before we start recommending that people go and do this, I think it's really important to make sure that people are injecting a sterile, right?
I can't put
Um,
a finger
but
on
yeah,
the, but you can look it up. It's cannabinoids uh, as esters. So whenever you make an oil into an ester, it makes it water soluble.
is this S.A. Ahmed cannabinoid ester constituents from high potency cannabis?
I don't understand.
What was the name of the paper? Was it S.A. Ahmed 2008
That's
cannabinoid
the one
ester?
I have.
Uh,
Cannabinoid
I
esters
don't remember, but it's
from high
cannabinoid
potency.
as esters.
The only one that I can find is the one that Ryan just cited by S.A. Ahmed from 2008. 11 new cannabinoid esters together with three known cannabinoid acids and
There,
delta
that,
9.
Oh, it's a
that's
patent. It's a patent. Sorry.
Oh, I
It's
found the patent. I found it.
yeah, CA277.
CA277.
Yeah, that's the one. That's probably it.
This
so
one right
there's
here.
unlimited amount of content. We could start our own university by start publishing this stuff.
That's the Plant Prairie Systems patent, but it looks like it's expired. It was 2003 it was filed. So
Oh, yeah. What do you get? 20 years?
it's depending on the 17 to 21, depending on a whole bunch of different things.
Right. You can extend your
Um,
claims, though, right?
yeah, if you alter the formulation or the delivery method, there's ways to extend it.
Okay.
So
Just for your information, Dr. Allen, I was the first one to develop a high CBD variety of cannabis.
this Sam? Hey Sam.
Yes, it's me. I'm Sam.
All right. God bless you.
I
Sam, I
knew it had
am.
medical applications,
And,
and
and under zero.
and at the time, pure CBD cost $20,000 a kilo. Now it's like $500 a kilo.
Yeah, well, when it was released in like '08 in Colorado, my buddy was getting $60,000 a kilo for it. And he watched it go from 60,000 to below 600.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
And that, my friends, is why sometimes regulation isn't a bad thing.
my friend was talking with with the GW folks about producing the cannabidiol down in Sicily, and then just bringing it up by boat because it was it in England. They were having all these problems with mold in the crop and all sorts of production problems because it was essentially a hemp crop grown outside at the time. And GW was absolutely convinced that nobody else was ever going to have CBD. A couple of years later, of course, like they found it in resin seeds and people started crossing in with hemp and all these other things. And now, of
Hi,
course,
me.
yeah,
I
yeah.
I'm the
Hi.
one who licensed the variety that they use to produce CBD, and I had it before I met the folks that own GW Pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
I had already developed it, predicting that if I built the baseball field, somebody would come to play.
Yeah. Well, and you even gave them the idea to do the one-to-one, right?
Uh, yes, but uh, I also suggested that it was a lot easier to create a variety that was almost pure CBD and a separate one that was almost pure THC, because then they could just mix it and achieve any ratio they wanted.
Right.
Because
Yeah. For the ratio, I meant meant for Sativex, as opposed to just doing a pure THC medicine.
yes,
Um,
well, both me and Robert had suggested to them that it would uh, change the effects and not cause so much paranoia in naive users.
right.
Hmm.
It's never a bad thing. Reduce
Oh,
paranoia. Hey, I wanted to give a shout out to Arkansas Sam, who passed away on December 16th. Sam Wayne Smith. He was in Peru when he passed away. He was from Bluff in Arkansas, and he had a couple of kids. He was definitely a unique individual. Donnie Wershafter posted his passing just the other day. So I wanted to shout him out. I also wanted to shout out our panelist Colin, who lost his father recently. He's been, really dealing with that for the last 3 weeks, so he hasn't really been able to come and share with us. But we're thinking of you, brother, and
Yeah.
I know you went through hell and high water with your father. Slowly losing his faculties and his mind over the last couple of years, and Colin's just been dealing with that like a champ, and now he's still in it, dealing with funerals and all of that. So we're thinking about you, brother. And on a positive note, I would also like to wish Dr. Mark Chaldone, who is on his way to 3 Fish New Year's shows right now, a very happy birthday. So we're celebrating your birthday while also recognizing the passing of a couple of unique original men. I'm sure there's many more who have been born and passed since that, but those were a couple that came to mind that I thought would be, nice to give a mention.
Yeah, I've been thinking of Colin's dad too. I guess he passed yesterday. So, we're thinking of you, dude, and sorry you're going through this stage right now. It's unfortunately something we all have to go through in life, losing our parents, but it's never easy when you do, as I know, Mark, you've been there. Um, and also, I wanted to wish a happy birthday to Dr. Riz. It's also her birthday today. She shares that birthday with Mark
Awesome.
Lewis. So happy birthday, Natasha.
Very cool.
She's also an incredible cannabinoid scientist doing some
Love
great
it.
things, skincare nowadays. So
Very cool.
Hey, I wanted to go back there on when we were talking schizophrenia and separation. My uncle was paranoid schizophrenic, and he ended up an untimely, horrible death due to it. But because of that, I've always followed schizophrenia and cannabis, and being one of the oldest providers in the United States and having on-site consumption, we have had multiple incidents with people with multiple personalities. Um, from what I can read and from my understanding, it allows those people with multiple personality disorders to slip more lucidly in and out of their personalities. I've read multiple research on this over the years, just again out of my curiosity after, my uncle being diagnosed. He was a U.S. Navy veteran, and he was on the USS Scorpion, and he had was starting to have mental breaks and was committed and pulled off the USS Scorpion. And people may know the USS Scorpion because it's at the bottom of the Marianas Trench right now. Right after he was pulled off of it, it went to max depth and imploded. And that's when he lost his mind because all of the men he served with, his friends, all died. And that's when his break with reality never went back. So for me, the curiosity has always been around, and especially the instance we had at Berkeley Patients Group were around people who had multiple personality disorders that decided to stop taking their medication because they felt fine that day. And then they came and self-medicated and then slipped into their more dangerous personalities. And in Berkeley, we have a psychological unit that we can call, and they come and evaluate. And if they have to call in the rubber room, etc., they do so. And that has happened a few times, and specifically due to people who had multiple personality disorders, who had a negative reaction due to them not taking their regular mental meds that they needed to take. So just keep that in mind, people, as we have this discussion. There's still a lot of unknown science around this, but the science
Sure.
that is there and around it, this is the caution and why we try to, when it comes to cannabis and people with multiple personality disorders, that's why there's a caution there, and there should be a caution until science gives us a better understanding. So I just wanted to clarify that, but I also wanted to bring up this, which is I just got in yesterday, which is from the now the teaching from the American Nurses Association, because cannabis nursing is now a specialty, and so there's a book now. There's a book on the subject here. Let's see if I can get one so you can actually scan the. There's an actual scan. There's a QR code, right? So you can actually learn more. And this is put out by the American Cannabis Nurses Association. My group, Veterans Action Council, has interviewed Rachel Parmalee, who's one of the nursing teachers who, now has contributed to this book. So not only has there been advances thanks to many other brave doctors, but now, the American Nursing Association has not only recognized it, it's recognized it as a specialization in nursing. So I just got this. It's scope and practices. Um, so I have yet to absorb it, but I'm looking forward to absorbing this in the coming weeks so I can get a better understanding, because I've spent the last 25 years referencing people to, notate and understand. So now that the nurses, right? So if you know a nurse, they can go into this specialty, and there's actually books now specifically for it. I got this off of Amazon. So this is now available to anyone and everyone around the world specifically.
Nice.
So the
Amazon sells books.
advancement, I know, crazy, huh? But now the accreditation gets better, right? Because Dr. David Allen, that's been a problem that we've had. And one reason why I had a whole bunch of pulmonologists reach out to me years ago and ask us to give them the teaching lesson on cannabis, because there's no education, or as far back as 5 years ago, there was no secondary credits for doctors and nurses, which, we know
Right.
doctors have to have ongoing credits every year to show they're in constant education. So now there is availability for that specifically around cannabis, and that is a huge advancement, because now there's an empowerment among the professionals that did not exist not too long ago, Dr. Allen, that you were
Right.
subjected to, painted with a negative brush. But it also, this is the respect we pay forward to you and those others who are the pioneers that fought through the bullshit so that now we can have normalcy. So I just want to take this time to thank you for your years of hard work and proving all of our anecdotal realities with reality.
All right. Well, my first day of residency, my chief resident said, remember, the pioneers get the arrows. And if we want to know your opinion, we'll tell it to you.
Fuck, ain't that the truth?
So when did you find that embarkation, right? What was the first extent, Dr. Allen, where you realized that cannabis was medicine? It had to be pretty early on, and of course you've gone through conventional, medicine, and now finding that cannabis actually fits in there somewhere, but the conventional medicine doesn't know how to fit that puzzle in. How was it navigating those waters?
Well, I started smoking when I was 17. I'm 72 now. And I immediately knew there was something about it that made me feel better. I didn't know. I just knew there was something about it. And there's been such a pile of money spent demonizing cannabis. I have a hard time believing anything the anti-cannabis people talk about. So when they first talked about schizophrenia link, you know, then I went to the causality and is it really causality or is it just association or what? So I just don't believe anything they say negative about cannabis because there's so much information that they're lying. So it's hard to believe the science nowadays. But if we start with reviewing patents, they can't argue with us.
And we used this in 2022 when my veterans group was lobbying on Capitol Hill. We were talking specifically with representatives and senators and making them aware of that specific patent and patent number. And I would say 99% of them had no idea that even existed.
Yeah. Who would even suspect that CBD in maybe the treatment or cure of diabetes? So, so the real studies are just with smoking cannabis, proving decreases incidence of diabetes by 66% over a 20-year period. But nobody's done any studies. What happens if you eat cannabis every day or hemp every day? What does that do to diabetes? And that may be actually the cure of diabetes because it protects the oxidation of your beta cells, which produce the insulin.
Can you explain that further for the layman like myself, what that means?
Well, the pancreas, uh, the beta cells in the pancreas are actually the ones that produce insulin, and they can do studies on beta cells by exposing the pancreas to oxidizing substances, and they can detect it. You know, if there's CBD on board before they give the substance that kills the cells, that 94% of the cells that are unprotected with CBD die, and the majority of cells live, 100% of them live if there's CBD on board. So it protects the cells from being killed by oxidative metabolisms. So take your CBD every day. It's a nutraceutical. It should be in the diets of all humans and animals because animals have the ECS as well.
Sorry, guys, I'm just doing some side stuff here in the chat. Might be time for a dab. I've got some full melt dry sift. God, it's been a long time since I've had some full melt dry sift. I'm not going to lie.
Man,
Cleaned this up the other day on the screens using the old Skunkman Sam tech, and this is just a 6-star melt into nothing. Oh my God. Everyone should have this
I'm
all
so
the
jealous.
time. Dude, you're like down in like freaking are you in Arkansas or where are you at right now?
Mississippi,
Mississippi.
South Mississippi.
You in the South, boy.
Man, you
Well,
the
that's
heap
deep.
trouble, boy.
That's deep south. Yeah, I'm from southern Louisiana. My sister lives in Jackson, so I understand exactly where you are and how challenging it is for cannabis, even with the new system that they have going. You know, Mississippi is still Mississippi. So, I mean, I've grown up with that understanding and challenging. But Mississippi currently has a better system than Louisiana, which has a very monopolistic, closed loop sort of
All
situation
right.
with limited access and availability. So, and the quality of their cannabis is definitely low compared to others.
That's a,
And they're gouging people. And a friend of mine, Councilmember Tony Landry, is currently going after a company called Good Day Farms for unfair practices, where they're gouging people in Louisiana for what they're growing and charging less in other states where they go. So this is a problem we're finding with multi-state
all right.
operators and navigating these laws of these little 10th Amendment realities that exist, and
Okay.
no two are the same.
All right. Well, here's an epiphany for you. You heard it here first. Cannabis and hemp are, in fact, money. And if you legalize cannabis or hemp in your state, money will come to your state in one of two fashions. If the citizens can grow, then the money will come to the citizens and they will spend it inside the state and everybody will prosper. If the citizens can't grow, then out of state cannabis cartel carpetbagger companies will come and grow and they will extort the money from the people and they will take it out of state. That's an epiphany.
That's more of a fact. But yes, that's a reality, and I think you succinctly put it into a reality that most people can understand, and that's why we're always fighting for people to have that ability to grow. Not only to have that ability, but of course we also know the joys that come with growing, and taking something while you're going through a very tough, hard time. There's a growth therapy that happens that becomes enriching to the soul of the person who's going through the illness, but also creating life while also suffering. And that dichotomy has seemed to enrich people's lives when they have that availability. So that's one reason we definitely fight for patients' access and especially
Right.
their ability to grow.
Yeah, and you can't put it in your food if it costs $20 a gram, but if you can grow it in your backyard, you can put it in your food.
We
Yeah,
need
there's
to have
that.
you on more, Dr. Allen. You're right up our alley and can speak a language that we can't, but also educate others on a level that needs to be ascended.
I am a humble servant.
A humble servant of Jah. I say that all the time, man. I love it. Now, do you want to tell a little bit about your past? You don't have to if you don't want to, but I'd
Sure.
love for you to talk about some of the crazy shit that went down, dude. This was insane.
Well, um, man, I don't even know where to start, but um, the police,
When did the shit hit the fan for Dr. David Allen?
well, it actually happened with my divorce. And, you know, if you have, if you're in the cannabis industry at all, never tell your girlfriend what you're doing because it will come back on you. And anyway, so when I got divorced, my wife was trying to do whatever she could to nail me from afar, and she called the drug task force and set them on me, and I left Mississippi and left my property in the care of my sister. It's a 48-acre lake estate. It's worth lots of money, and it's close to the town, and the drug task force wanted it. And so anyway, she called the drug task force and set them into investigating me, and so I left and I went to California to start a cannabis practice as a doctor, and I left here, and about 9 months later, they raided my property with my sister here, and they they found like 4 grams of marijuana and 14 grams of hash, and they charged her with it. But they also charged me. I was living in California. They charged me with possession and sales and a bunch of stuff, and so
What's the charge for that? What do you get, like 10 years mandatory minimum down there for something like that?
uh, I don't know exactly, but yeah, they originally wanted to give me like 35 years in prison.
Jesus Christ.
That was the negotiation, that if I accepted that, they would only give me 35. Otherwise, I had to go to court. So I went to court after 14 months in prison pre-trial, and I was found. I had 6 felonies, uh, and the judge threw out 4 of them as having no evidence, and the other 2 came back 11-1 and 7-5 on the other 2 charges, and the judge declared a mistrial. And so basically, I was saved by jury nullification, and every cannabis activist should learn about jury nullification and its implications. And because we can change bad laws by making it unprofitable to try to prosecute some laws, and alcohol prohibition was saved by jury nullification, and so was slavery, was stopped by jury nullification. So they were prosecuting people trying to get slaves out of the South, and after a while, people realized that helping slave escape slavery was not a crime, and they would refuse to prosecute people trying to help slaves escape slavery. And so jury nullification is a really important concept. All you got to say is not guilty. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to say why, and they can't punish you for saying not guilty. So you say not guilty, and they can't find a jury of 12 people that will say guilty. So after a while, the judges can't find 12 people to prosecute a crime.
And
So
also, prosecutors don't like to prosecute a case they can't win.
exactly.
That is
I
true. Well, you can see what you're saying is true, because look at how they've done that in San Francisco, where it doesn't matter what the laws are, because if you don't prosecute said laws, it's like the law doesn't exist. And they're just having to change these laws again right now. And this is on the flip side of not something so good. It's being used for bad right now. I don't know why why they want police not to do their jobs, but you just have people walking into stores and robbing these stores, and no one can do anything. They just watch them come and walk right out of the stores
That's
because
interesting.
people, yeah,
I
they don't
heard of
prosecute.
this is a new concept to me, and thank you for teaching me that.
Yeah, it's a wild one anyway. It is a wild one. So yeah, continue on about your story. So they came for you. They wanted to give you 35 years. You're like, I'm going to court.
Yeah. So I spent 14 months pre-trial in George County Correctional Facility here in Mississippi, and
Jesus.
had to fight my way with the inmates, and all kinds of crazy shit happened.
How fucking crazy is it that you trying to like just having cannabis in your life gets you a doctor? Like, kind of like, don't we look up to doctors? Like, they're like, oh, it's the doctor. He's saving lives. He saved my
Yeah.
grandpa. He saved my mother. Like, he operated on her heart. If you were like some criminal doctor ripping off the system and fucking just prescribing oxys and just doing all the heinous shit, you would be
Exactly.
celebrated and win awards.
Right. I had doctors back here in Mississippi talk bad about me because I was into cannabis, but these same doctors were giving prescriptions for Xanax and opioids and stuff like that. They were the ones that were doing harm, and I wasn't.
It's scary that the system is built like that. It's scary that all of the systems are built like that. It's not just health, it's justice, it's every system that seems to be in place right now is like bizarro land. It's like flipped upside down. It's like what it's saying it is, it's the opposite of.
Well, exactly. So the medical board came after me in California. Kamala Harris was the on the top of the lawsuit against me, and they claimed that I didn't do a good faith exam. Now, there's no definition for a good faith exam, and it deliberately so because they want it ethereal, so they can claim that you're not doing a good faith exam, whatever that is, and they can take your medical license away under a made up excuse. So the law changes the reality by changing the verbiage. They change the language, which changes the reality. So they say they make up words. And so really when you go to trial, they don't try you in English. They try you in legal jargon that you have to hire an interpreter, they call a lawyer, to interpret the language that they're charging you with so you can defend yourself. So it's changing the language changes the reality.
Do you think that Kamala Harris has changed her mind about cannabis?
Well, she was smoking cannabis before she went after me anyway. So
Oh,
yeah.
I know that.
Yeah, we educated her, Sam. Various people, while she was the California Attorney General, made her aware because there was a lot of test cases and situations. So she is very educated and would have been much friendlier than the administration we're going to be existing under.
We'll see.
Well, I'm just glad she didn't become president because I didn't want the president to be the one that took my medical license away.
You know what, the way I look at it, and I don't know a ton about American politics, but I have yet to see an administration say actively that they're going to go after the FDA and the pharmaceutical corporations. I've never seen that said before. And it seems almost believable. Like you're like, fuck, like obviously everything out of a politician's mouth is a huge lie, and I totally understand that. But when I
Right.
saw that, I was like, whoa, am I like, that's crazy, right? Like I'm looking to my left, I'm looking to my right. I'm like, I wish someone in Canada would get into power and say those things. Like, holy shit. Because those things seem to be the biggest protectors of prohibition of cannabis. I wonder if an administration who goes after the pharmaceutical cartels is more likely to allow a drug or a plant like cannabis to exist and be legal than an administration that does not.
Worst thing about prosecutors is that they sometimes conceal evidence that's
Oh, yeah.
beneficial to a patient and they don't get prosecuted for it.
Right.
Well, that's all the corruption that I was kind of talking about in all of these systems. It seems to be like a very human trait, temptation, right? When temptation is just too high, people buckle. And when you think of what these companies are protecting and why we've been banging our heads against the walls for 40 plus years to look at cannabis and why, even Canada that allows it as a medicine still makes statements that are like, we don't believe there's any medical value to cannabis. It's like Health Canada said that like less than 2 years ago, something like it, that
Yeah.
they just didn't really, that they were forced, their hand was forced. It's like, whoa, like you're the gatekeeper for this entire thing that really is about people's health, at least
Yeah.
from the medical side, not the recreational side. Although that could be made argument towards the preventative aspect of cannabis, and which then becomes, Brownie Mary's logo of there's no such thing as recreational cannabis. It all becomes medical at that point in time.
Right.
Anyway,
That
I'm
was
just.
that was Dennis Perone. Although
Oh, Dennis
they work
Perone. Okay.
they work tightly together and were joined at the hip many a time.
I always
Yeah.
saw it as a Brownie Marie quote. See, one time someone gets it wrong, and then the
It's
rest of us pass it
definitely
on.
Dennis. And
Yeah.
when I would talk with Dennis, I would say, does
Yeah.
that include the industrial hemp? Because he
Yeah.
would say all cannabis use is medical. And I would say, even when you're growing
Yeah.
hemp for fiber,
Those were therapeutic genes I was selling, Sam. You know,
Yeah.
Well,
100%
of course
therapeutic genes.
it's medical for the planet. Like, think of how much better it is to not spray the guy overspraying cotton compared to the guy growing hemp, not to mention the phytoremediative properties. Like, it is medicinal for the soil to grow hemp.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
not only that,
yeah.
it's just an example. When we grew golden compote in Eastern Europe, by growing that color, we no longer had to bleach the fiber. And so when you no longer have to bleach something, remember fiber doused with bleach, the bleach stays in there forever. It doesn't go away.
that
Okay.
variety was bred by my good friend, Dr. Ivan Boska, correct?
Correct. And that varietal helped us once it was water retted. Since it was a lighter color, we no longer had to bleach it. And so, therefore, it saved a whole series of properties that would have gone through that are detrimental. So, it's even grown correctly, and the right varietal can save multiple steps that conventional machinery and production doesn't live by.
Well, I knew Dennis Perone, and I'd like to add the caveat to his statement that all cannabis use is medicine. And my caveat is even if you don't understand the complex science of the endocannabinoid signaling system.
True. True story. Well, it'll be interesting to see how the show is received. We're hoping on starting it in early January. And like Dr. Allen said, probably 10 to 15-minute episodes, maybe one a week. And that this show will be for members only of the channel. We're looking at not a lot, four or $5 per $5 per episode. So we'll see how that goes for the start. I've already had some people sign up, and
Nice.
that's going to go directly to help Dr. Allen, and also to pay some of the guests that we have on who will take their time to break down the science simplistically. And I think another important part is really going to be in the title, to make sure people can go back and find the ones they're looking for, whether we title them with the patent or you know, the title. It has to be something, once 100 or 200 episodes have occurred, that you can go back and be like, oh, what was the episode where they spoke about such and such a patent? So, I learned this from Hash Church, because so much of the Hash Church gems are buried in 1,000 hours of Hash Church. And when people hit me up and say, hey, do you remember the one where so and so was on as a guest, and her daughter was nonverbal autistic, and she walked and spoke for the first time? And then I'm like, oh shit, like,
I'm gonna
no,
ask a
I do not.
question.
Go ahead, Johnny B.
Well, for some reason, every time I talk, my volume keeps going down to nothing. So I was trying to say a few different things, a few
Oh
different.
shit.
I don't know why, which is pretty cool. As you've been doing this for the last like hour and but 2 hours, I created something for you, Dr. Allen, and for everybody here. It's a cannabinoid research assistant for patents and insights. It's called Cairo. So, what are the latest patents on cannabinoids? How do our categorize patents and patient, a bunch of stuff. So, I just kind of built this. This is something I'm pretty good at now, and this might be able to aid and along. There's things we can take a look at. I can help along with this way. This is great where we can start looking at this, and this just gave me a great idea, and I threw it in the chat here for you, and you can take a look at it. And I've been kind of working heavy on this and how we can actually get this information out there. And this is just one more way of being able to use a super intelligence to gather that data, track it, categorize it, so we can actually utilize it. So this is pretty awesome. So just wanted to chuck that in there. So
Awesome, Johnny B. I'm signing in right now.
yeah, take a look at that. It's I'm like giving myself a pat on the back and
Oops, we ran into an issue. Uh-oh.
so many awesome ways. So this is just something that we can start playing with. So I want you guys to utilize this right now and see if it got any in there, and then we can kind of work together on this and then really get this to the mainstream like now. I'm
All
on
right.
that.
I'm just
Since we were
signing in right now. Go ahead,
since,
Etienne.
since we were talking Dennis Peron, Dennis Peron was also a veteran. I'm also a combat veteran. And I received this award from AMVETS, which is one of the oldest American veterans organizations.
Oh,
And
that's
this it has my name in it, but when you open it up, it's the Dennis Peron Award. And inside reads
oh
the inscription. Dennis Robert Perone, April 8th, 1945, January 27th, 2018, was an American activist and businessman who became a leader in the movement for legalization of cannabis throughout the 90s. Dennis is considered the quote-unquote father of marijuana. He influenced many in California and thus changed the political debate on marijuana in the United States. He served in the United States Air Force in Vietnam, and he was there during the Tet Offensive.
You the tools, you just click canvas, and that's going to create a new canvas.
So
I'll
there, that's
show you guys something here if I can.
Please do.
Oh, I don't know. Oh, here it is. All right. This is something I created. I had patches and bumper stickers. Drug war veteran.
Ah, that's heavy,
I,
dude.
I've got that patch.
I've
Of
got that
course you
pin too,
do.
and that patch.
All right. Yeah, I made this. Because
Well, thank you. Thank
I'm
you
a
for your
drug war
service.
veteran.
Yeah, you are. Holy shit.
Man. Okay. I'm having trouble controlling this thing, but
Well, you have to push those arrows the same.
all
Yeah,
right,
there
there
you
we
go.
go. I got it. So anyway,
Awesome.
I'm a drug war veteran. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I can't believe Kamala Harris was like on the top of the document against you.
Man. Yeah, I'm glad she didn't become president, man. I'd be in trouble for sure.
Yeah, I guess you might not forget, hey?
Yeah.
But that's why we educated her after you were attacked, Dr. Allen, and others, because we realized that we can continue to, chastise these people, or we can own up and actually educate them. So unfortunately, you were one of, like me, those pioneers who got the arrows, and they hurt.
Too
They
bad,
really hurt.
too bad they
But
couldn't recognize their education and be like, you know what? Like instead of today destroying a bunch of sort of basically innocent people's lives, what we could do is send out a bunch of letters with our name on the top, apologizing and explaining we now have a better understanding of this subject, and we're no longer going to be trying to, prosecute people to such a serious degree. Really, I mean,
they could
destroying
never
lives.
they could never admit to a crack in the wall because once there was a crack in the wall, remember, there was no medical defense, right? In federal
Right.
court. That's why
Yeah.
Berkeley Patients Group was named Berkeley Patients Group. So if we were put before 12 of us plus two, that they would hear patients every time the business name was read, so that they would eventually get, oh, this is a group of Berkeley patients.
Right.
And that's the extent it took. And many of us took that type of foresight because there was no defenses. And over time, we were able to navigate those, create organizations like Americans for Safe Access and others that became those rallying organizations because Normal and others wouldn't touch medical cannabis. They were taking it all as a whole, and patients were feeling left out and literally pushed out in the cold. And Dr. Allen was one of those originally. But I mean, look at Dr. Todd Micarea and Dr. Frank
Yeah.
Lucido, who they were immediately gone after by the Clinton administration. General McCaffrey put their names up on in press releases and on
Right.
television and actively went after the Americans' right to have that doctor-patient
Yeah.
confidentiality, and they had to test those waters and won that. But that's the extent the doctors had to, because I'm sorry, as much as we'd love that kumbaya, Marcus, serious, that they were not going to admit all of a sudden that cannabis had medical properties.
Yeah.
We just
Which
now
which
have them
shows it shows
pulling, hold
that
on,
we
they're
need to get
pulling
them
teeth
out.
right now just for Schedule 5 to talk about Schedule 3, right? We've only, after 50 plus years, got it out, or we're finally moving it out of
Insane.
Schedule 1, and that's taken multiple lawsuits, multiple failures to finally arrive where we currently are, which is
Yeah.
in a new space altogether.
I'm just like, shit or get off the pot, guys. Like, holy fucking shit. This is like, as long as that mentality exists that we can't let a crack in the wall happen, we're being governed by the wrong people. And when that crack finally explodes and that wall collapses, then we can look at whoever's in power and be like, okay, you know what? Everything's not perfect, but this is the direction we should be going. It's fuck, we're not asking for a lot. Just be human and let people have access to a plant.
Well, that's what we had to do. We had to use our humanness to get Proposition, what,
Of
215
course,
passed, to
of course.
show, and and then each way, right, medical has led to the that acceptance. But even though the changes of that many states, Marcus, didn't lead the FDA to go for its change, it had to take the president and the treaty change that my friend Michael Crowitz and the group actually affected, that is having this ripple effect currently, that we're going through rescheduling. So if Michael Crowitz and our international group of Kenzie and our wonderful people at Fields of Green for All in South Africa, Myrtle Clark and them, hadn't have actually gone to the UN and changed it in 2020, we would not currently be where we are. So that's why we have to continue fighting currently for adult use that we're shooting for by 2030. Because we can't wait for America. America has shown us firsthand, and the doctor's experience firsthand has taught us that they do not care about science. They do not care about logic. They have and protect a whole bunch of pharmaceutical companies and alcohol companies that are now being affected by this. But once the rescheduling and change happens, the United States government changes. Due to the Commerce Clause, it now protects and will protect cannabis. It will no longer shun it and push it away. Now it will protect it, and actually protect it just like it would Coca-Cola or any other American corporate interest. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's amazing. Something's got to change in a big way anyway. It's crazy to just keep asking these same people permission to fucking let us do all the things we want to do, which
But
really are
look what it
very
took for you
simple,
to do it in
basic.
Canada. You had to have how many different citizens petition your actual court to change that they combined all, what, 300 plus cases into, you
Oh,
know,
I swear, I don't even think it was that as much as Trudeau wanted to be elected, and that's how he was going to do it. And since then, he's
so you think
just
it was
decimated.
Trudeau's political
Oh
arrow?
yeah. Yeah. Well, it was. It was. He's known for it in Canada. That's the one thing that he did. Not that he did a good job at it. He's dude, this guy can't walk the streets of Canada without being like heckled and yelled at and swore at and like verbally abused. There's a video right now of him. He went to a ski hill and shut the whole thing down and was cutting in front of families. And he had a woman come up to him at his car, and she was like, "Mr. Prime Minister." And he turns around all smiley. He's putting his hand out to shake her hand, and she shakes his hand, and she says, "Get the fuck out of BC. Seriously." And then walks away. And it's just like, we've never had that in the history of our country. And don't get me wrong, like people disliked Harper and Brian Mulroney was disliked and like Jean Chrétien. There have been prime ministers. Every prime minister has been disliked. I don't know of any prime minister within my life that was as hated as this particular one. He is
No,
just
he's yeah, he's super
he's
smarmy. He's just a total
he's
douchebag.
yeah, it's weird,
Whether
dude.
you like that party or not, he's not a good leader, and he's so he's got so much hatred. Like I can't imagine why he hasn't passed the torch down to somebody else in the party.
I got
Super
I think
smug.
political parties are ridiculous myself. They're all absurd on a different level. But I think
I
the
agree.
legalization was a little bit more complicated than that. Like we had this patient program that grew up completely out of control. The MMAR system.
That's true.
It was they were handing out licenses, and they still do. They're handing out licenses willy-nilly to anybody that wants to grow a few plants. And along with the along with the license to cultivate, you would get a license to possess in public. And people had very high licenses. Like there was a lawyer in
Hmm.
Canada, for example, that had a license for 1,500 plants, right?
Mhm.
And many kilos of flour that he could pull around. And so the cops would pull these people over and they'd be clearly trafficking cannabis, moving it from their grow to a dispensary, and nothing could be done about it. Like the cops essentially were, they had no power to regulate the law. Um, and so we had two parties. The Stephen Harper's party tried to shut it down using this court case that became the Allard case that Marcus and any other Canadian knows about. Um, and Trudeau took the opposite tact, which was to finally regulate and open the market up to everyone,
Uh,
and
don't
legalize the sale. Because it was these dispensaries were operating with impunity in many Canadian cities. There were shops on every corner in every neighborhood, and it was unregulated and uncontrolled. And
500.
it was really about, to me at least, my opinion was it was really about like how do we wrangle this thing that has already gotten out of the cage, right?
it,
How do we put some kind of regulation around it?
isn't the
So
worst Canadian Emily Murphy?
Hmm. I think
I
you might
thought
have
it was the
surpassed.
geese. Those geese that are the international ambassadors, I thought those were the rudest Canadians ever.
If you give them their space and you don't fuck with them, they're pretty cool, man. But if you get in their shit, they'll let you know.
I do not like your Cobra chickens.
yeah,
Nice.
they're dinosaurs.
Yeah, they are. Dude, they can fly like as far as like a 747. Like they're insane.
Emily Murphy was like the Anslinger of Canada.
Yeah,
Right.
she was a total racist. I remember at a
But how many times did she get caught doing blackface in photograph, Ryan?
Emily Murphy. Well, it was so long ago. I mean, we're talking 100 years ago now, aren't
I
we?
know, but Trudeau got caught twice doing that.
I know. Yeah. Well, he's a goofball. I mean,
Dude.
he's got to go. He really absolutely has to go. I can't believe he's not stepping down. But whatever. It is what it is. It's funny. I was at a rally on Parliament Hill, one of our federal marijuana party legalization rallies, and it wasn't very many people. There must have been only a couple hundred people there, if that. And Boris, do you remember Mark Boris?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, from Grimskunk, and he later became a politician. He actually later became a liberal politician,
Yeah, he did.
and he went to um, pie, like a whipped cream, put a whipped cream pie on the face of the statue of Emily Murphy that is on Parliament Hill. And so he made this announcement using a megaphone that he was going to go and do this thing. And so everybody walked over to the statue, and two RCMP police officers decided that they were going to get in between him and the statue and prevent him from throwing this whipped cream pie on the face of the statue. And Boris tried to dance around them, and in the process got some whipped cream on one of the jackets of the RCMP officer, and they charged him with assault. Right? And
Really?
so,
Can you get charged for assault with that? Or is that only in Europe you're allowed to do that? Because they do it to politicians and they do it specifically because you can't be charged with assault.
well, they charged him with assault of a peace officer,
Ah.
and
Oh.
yeah, he ended up coming down and staying with me. Because I lived not too far from the courthouse in a little town or a little neighborhood called Sandy Hill, just outside of the University of Ottawa. And so Boris would come down and stay with me, and he'd go to he'd go to court. And I remember he showed up once, and he was like, "Yeah, I got court tomorrow, and my roommate had just been caught with possession for the purpose of trafficking." And he was like, "Oh yeah, I've got court tomorrow as well. Like we'll go down together." Right? But yeah, I think they eventually dropped the charges against him. But it was so absurd. I mean, that was the level of stupidity in Canada, is that they're like, like you're having the police get in between someone trying to throw a pie at a statue, right? Like
But
they're
think of the billable hours. Like, what did they pull out of that? 100, 200 G's by getting him to court all those times and locking up paperwork and just making things super inefficient. Like, I bet you it was at least 50 grand that they
well, it
billed
was
and took in while he was just like, to him, it was just like, this is so weird. It's such a waste of time. I don't even understand it. In the meantime, they're just like pulling money in left, right, and center from all of these people that they're doing this to on the constant. It's definitely a part of the corruption. Keep
oh man,
the
it was
wheels.
like some
It's
stupid cop like wanting to be like insert his like well, how like what
waste the
damage
system.
would whipped cream do to a bronze statue? Right? I mean, these
Exactly.
things are out in the rain and the snow and the ice like
Yeah.
for decades, right? And you're concerned about a little bit of whipped cream getting put on the statue. Like it's just so absurd. It was a symbolic protest, right? But I
Well,
mean,
if he wanted to bring the right symbology to the party, he should have brought like 10 or 15 pigeons and just put like bread up on that fucking statue and they would have covered that thing in shit in the first hour of being there. Then that's like a real sort of protest. Look, I've got the birds doing it for me and there's nothing you can do.
I just remember us being down there, and it was like again, this must have been what year would this have been? Early 2000s.
Mm,
And they had like five RCMP with cameras rolling the entire time to
I
to
remember
film
that.
everybody in the protest, and they're doing intel, they're collecting intel.
Yeah.
And it was just like, we were an official registered political party.
It's
Um
always the same mentality, though. They did it here like crazy. There was always cops with video cameras, like filming at the protests.
Everywhere they were like on top of the on top of the buildings, on top of the
It's
art.
just such a weird flex when you think of all the money wasted. I always felt like, aren't there like missing children you could be looking for? Or like, isn't there just something that's like super important that you could be spending your time on right now? Because here's the thing, we're already filming this. We'll film it.
Yeah,
And if you gave us a site to post it, we'd even do that too. We'll create the video for you. Like you don't have to waste your money. Go do something important for society. And now we do. We literally post everything. We get together on Sundays for 4 hours and just talk turkey
and smoke weed.
and smoke hash.
All
The
kinds of.
Dr.
I
David
I
Allen
one
bounce.
time in Amsterdam, I pied the publisher of Treating Yourself magazine, Marco.
Yeah, Marco Rendo.
Yes, because he was publishing stories about me that were just false, and I tried to straighten him out. He refused. So when he was in Amsterdam at the High Times Cannabis Cup, I actually what I did was I paid two uh, girls who were like models at one of the cannabis seed companies, and they walked up to him and pied him. And
I was right
yeah,
there.
oh, you were there?
Well, not only was I there, but your wife told me it was going to happen and said, "Can you film it?" And I filmed it and put it live on the internet. And so, how everyone saw it, because otherwise, like 25 people or 50 people would have seen it. I put it on
Correct.
the internet and got
Yeah.
thousands of views. And then Marco hit me up and was like, "Dude, what the fuck?" I was like, I didn't,
Well,
yeah, I was actually funny enough. I was telling the story to Johnny B 2 days ago or 48 hours ago, maybe. Yeah, but because again, same thing. Johnny or not Johnny, sorry. Marco had posted a story from Joe
I
Pietri.
knew it. I knew it was Petrie.
Yeah, and Pietri
published
was
more than one.
yeah, well, and when you become an editor of a magazine and you allow people to put libel into print, you're actually liable for that for the damages. And I remember saying I ripped Marco apart about it online and saying, you've allowed this guy to post these stories that are completely fabricated as if they're fact, and you're contributing to the smear campaign.
Correct.
And I later confronted him about the same thing in Barcelona at a one of those associations. But yeah, like Marco was just he was really about doing it for the publicity, right? And he claimed that he was, well, it's not me, it's I'm just giving a
I
place
know.
for the story to be written, right? And as you Marcus know, I mean, we take these slights against Sam quite personally, right?
Well, I
So
took this one even more personally because it wasn't just a slight against Sam. It was a massive bashing of me as well and connecting the two of us. It said in the article that Sam, or no, Bubble Man, a production or a creation of Skunkman Sam. He created me. He like created me to go out and do what
And you
I was
never
doing.
thanked me, Marcus.
Dude, I thank you every day, brother. What are you talking about? Yeah, Joe Petrie, you have to understand that whole thing with Joe Petrie, and really even the reason he went after Sam for sure was because of me. Because how I met Joe Petrie, I was at a Toker's Bowl that Mark Emery was throwing. It might have been the first Toker's Bowl, and I was sharing a booth with Chris Bennett, which is our cannabis historian, written a lot of great books, too many to name. And so I was sharing my booth with Chris, and because he didn't have a booth, and I was like, "Oh, dude, just here, I got a little booth here. Put your stuff on it." I was doing the bubble bags. It was like 2000 or 2001, and Chris came up to me at one point and he said, "Hey, there's this guy. He wrote a really cool book called King of Nepal, and he doesn't have anywhere to put it down. Do you think you'd be willing to put it on your booth?" So, how I started all of this with Joe Petrie just hating my guts to the tune of like, still to this day, the sound of my voice is probably like fingernails on chalkboards. And so this fucking guy, I offer him to come and spend time at my booth and sell his book. I'm not asking for money. I probably paid $1,000. It was like no problem. So it started as a gift from me to him, happily out of respect for Chris Bennett, because I have such respect for him. He's such a good dude. And these authors aren't always like super wealthy. They're struggling. They're trying to sell books and stuff. I was happy to help. And we had a great weekend, honestly. Joe told stories and he seemed like a serious guy, but a fun guy. And we, smoked everywhere, boat cruises. I think the police tried to pull us over on the boat at one point in time. It was a total Mark Emery event. He rented out this restaurant, which like at the time was absolutely unheard of, to like get a whole restaurant to just puff tough in like 2002 or whatever the first Toker's Bowl was. It was incredible, truly. Belly dancers, like the whole 9 yards. Really beautiful experience. One of the best events I had ever been to, hands down. Even for probably 10 to 15 years afterwards, it still remained one of the best events I'd ever been to. And then at the end, like a couple weeks after it ended, Joe Petrie hit me up and he's like, "Hey, blah, blah, blah. Thanks for sharing my booth. And I wanted to get you that money." And I was like, "Oh, you don't owe me any money, dude." And he's like, "No, well, for the bags." And I'm like, "For the bags?" He's like, "Yeah, yeah, I grabbed some of those bags from you." I'm like, "The bags, like the bubble bags?" He's like, "Yeah, I grabbed a set of bubble bags." I'm like, "Time out. You grabbed a set of bubble bags?" And for whatever reason, I just couldn't had I just maybe just been like, "Oh, okay, cool, dude. Well, whatever. Yeah, you can send a little bit of cash." But I was just like, "Time out. You took a set of bubble bags?" And I kind of just couldn't get over it. And I was pointing it out. And in a very short time, our conversation just did a 180. And then what did he say to me at the end? He said, "I will do everything in my power to destroy you." And then he hung up on me. And I was like, "Wow,
And
that was
and
pretty
and
serious."
also, Marcus, he
Yeah.
was a giant supporter of Reinhardt.
Well, listen, that was also because of me. The whole reason he was a Reinhardt supporter was because of me. And also, why I ended up getting sued by Reinhardt was also because of me. So I'm not blaming Joe Petrie for anything. I became friends with Reinhardt. I paid him 6 figures for his patent that was truly his patent, and the bags were absolutely created from. There was no doubt about it after I went through the long lawsuit. But bottom line is, for inviting Joe Petrie into my life, but not letting that 1 second go when he was telling me he had the money for the bags, it caused me years and years of pain and anguish. Like it is incredible how much a person can fuck with you. And so I can laugh about it now because really I learned from it. I learned that, the bags, even though Eldon had kind of invented them and Mila had been the first to bring them to market, they were really based on his patented machine at the time. That Mila had signed the contract with him in 97, I guess, 97, because the isolator bags made their debut in 98. Mine were March of 99. So I went through and learned all of this all because of this inviting of this gentleman onto my onto my booth.
You know my personal feelings about it, that he didn't deserve that patent because it was not new or novel when I had instructions in High Times magazine how to do much the same thing.
But you
Uh,
didn't have the instructions in High Times magazine. I went through this with very good lawyers, and the problem was, had you published those instructions, it would have been a done deal. Although
Yeah.
the novelty of ice, which I don't believe was in your
no, I just mentioned
instructions,
cold water. You're right.
exactly, which we
I did not
argued that
mention
cold
ice.
water is made cold by ice. We argued that. It was a big point of contention for a long time. I went very deep down this rabbit hole. Trust me, had you published those instructions, or had I even been able to meet one person who ordered them and had the original instructions, that would have put it into the category of previously published art. But I could not make
Ed
that final connection.
Rosenthal ordered one, and so did Trichome Technologies, Kenny Merrow.
Yeah,
He ordered.
they didn't have them. They couldn't produce them, so that was
Okay.
the problem. But yeah, in the end, I felt fine paying Reinhardt. It was well deserved. Um, he truly did get a patent on something that changed the game, and I was happy to be a part of it. And it felt like after being bashed for 10 years by people saying I was a thief, it felt amazing to be on the right side of whatever that was like, no, I wasn't a thief. I paid my well dues to the actual guy who owned the patent. In the meantime, the people calling me a thief did not.
What year
Well,
was the patent filed?
Oh, the patent was filed in like maybe 98 or
yeah, because
97. 97. It would have to have been before 98 because it was 97. That's when he went to Amsterdam and signed the deal with Mila. He wasn't showing that machine due to his understanding of how to file a patent to anyone until it was patent pending.
I should have filed the patent in '88
You should have.
when Neville showed me how to do that.
What
Yes.
year was Rob's Hashish book patented or published?
98.
Hmm.
Yeah. No, I went through this in court. Trust me. I took like the publishing date of Rob's book was a big thing. The publishing of the instructions, like it was all like so close. And then the more and more I tried to like basically not pay Reinhardt, um, the more and more it was just didn't make sense. And when I finally met Reinhardt and we spoke and we didn't have lawyers around us anymore, and I wouldn't say my lawyer was a bad lawyer. He was good. He was on my side, but their interest is to keep things going, and our interest was to shut it down right away.
Well,
He had
Was this in
other,
Europe, Mark? Where was the case? Where was the case done? In
the
Europe
case
or
was here
Australia?
in Canada. Yeah, it was here in Canada, and so I invited two other Canadian companies that were doing water extraction, Jason from Payload Bags and Lucy from the Triple Extractor Bags out in Quebec. She was a single mom, and I thought she could probably use the help not paying for a lawsuit on her own because he was suing all of us. It was easy for us to combine our forces and use one lawyer. So that saved us like 66% off each of the cost of the lawsuit. So we had all these strategies, but in the end, sometimes the strategy isn't really to destroy the person on the other side. It's opening up your mind and ears long enough to hear that maybe you were at fault. And if you were, this is an opportunity for you to make it right.
Yeah, or pay the least amount of money. I mean, whether you pay a lawyer or you pay
He
on the other
also
side.
threatened to sue Mila, but he never did.
Yeah, he definitely served her papers on a few occasions or threatened, but you're right. Yeah, in Europe, yeah, Reinhardt had a lot of other things going on. One included him very personal matter with his grandchild, and it was a very important personal matter that was like far exceeded the importance of a water extraction case. And so, a lot of people that probably would have been sued did not get sued because I think because of those more important reasons. And I just am happy that myself and Jason and Lucy, we all just paid out and paid for the patent for eternity. I can make bubble bags and I'm not going to be sued, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with when I found out how it came to be that the bags themselves specifically weren't from Sadhu Sam's water extraction secret, and it came directly from looking at that machine. Um, and that's why I felt fine with paying him that fee.
The patent number on that is 9899-895-394B2. Is that correct?
Reinhardt Delp.
Link it in the chat. Somebody can see it.
Yep.
The reason Marco Renda quit working with Joe Petrie was because I sent him a copy of Joe's book where he admitted helping the DEA bust a 500-kilo load to New York City.
Yeah, it's in his book. That's crazy.
Marco Rendo did?
No.
Marco Rendo, when I sent him that quote from his book, refused to have anything to do with Joe Petrie anymore.
I'm just looking up. Okay, guys, this patent was filed in 1998, U.S. patent. Because I created that little thing there, so it's kind of cool.
Yeah, but I think it was pending in 97 or something. There was definitely a 97 attached to it.
Okay, there you go. You would know that then.
Well, I spent like $100,000 going to court over the course of 5 years with this particular, and there's two patents. He had both method and apparatus patents, right? And then you can see.
I never tried to file a patent because I did not create the method that I used. It was told to me by Neville, and I didn't think it was mine, so of course I wouldn't try to patent it. But I wish I would have, just to save you guys money.
I was okay with it. In the end, I was okay. I felt quite happy paying the patent fee.
There's one here right now. It says for international patent on applications detailed on water-based extraction and purification process for cannabinoid acids utilizing solutions varying pH levels in soluble. There's now all kinds of different ones here coming up. Now they've attached different ones onto that. The patent on isolating cannabis by using water. Yeah, there's a few different ones in here now.
When I did experiments with the water extraction method, I tried it with sugar, I tried it with salt, I tried it with everything you could think of, hot water, cold water. I tried it with boiling hot water, and it made the resin that was extracted in it into a lava lamp. It was really cool, and it also kind of ruined the hash, but
Here's a new one. I don't know, maybe not new, but old. A U.S. patent 10717-717B1. This patent describes a process of producing refined and decarboxylated cannabis extractions from freshly harvested, pre-frozen cannabis by using cold ethanol extractions, emphasizing on the importance of pre-treatment extraction. Yeah, so this is kind of cool to kind of look this up now and bring this all these patents that are there and be able to dig into that now. This is a great episode, guys. I just want to thank you for helping me find more tools to help you guys. This is fun.
Welcome back, Dr. Allen. We lost you there for a bit. And welcome to Stephen. He just showed up as well.
Hey, everybody.
What's going, dude?
I'd like to introduce, this is Etienne Fontan. He is a cannabis expert, former Marine, and a researcher working on head traumas. And he's a part of my science group. And probably one of the newer brilliant minds working in cannabis. So I wanted to introduce him to y'all in the group. And since you had Dr. Allen on, doc, I call him Dr. Philpott because his knowledge is on that level, and he was working on that until he stepped into the real world. So introduce yourself, Stephen, to Hash Church.
Hey, what's going on? I don't know if I call myself an expert, but I'm a Marine Corps veteran. When I came back from deployment, my leg was shattered in a bunch of pieces. Same story as you hear a bunch of veterans. They gave me 90 Percocet and said, take them as you need them. Um, and that stuff was screwing with my head. Like it wasn't good. And one of my buddies was like, hey man, hit this dab rig. I got a 6 foot bong. I got a gas mask. And I didn't take my opioids for like a week. And my only question was just, how can a plant replace these pharmaceutical drugs? And that was a decade of a rabbit hole. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I spent my time actually coaching in the NCAA, uh, collecting data on human stress and performance and different things like that. What I realize is these athletes, they go through some of the same PTSD and stuff as Navy SEALs and Marines. And during COVID, when a bunch of states were legalizing, I got a dispensary job in Illinois, working for PharmaCann, which at the time I didn't know what the hell a PharmaCann was. And after 8 months of working for the largest privately owned cannabis company in the US, I was like, if these are the companies who are leading the way, we're going to be screwed because they don't know what they're doing. Um, so, yeah, I got my master's degree in trichome morphology and actually looking at the density of trichomes across the same plant, but at different
Oh, I have a
locations.
question for you then.
Yeah.
I've been looking at cannabis under the microscope since 1972. And a long time ago, I noticed that when we had cannabis that had red hairs on it, it seemed to have a different effect on us, had a more sedating effect. And when I started looking at the red hairs, the pistils, I guess, they had trichomes on them, but they were smaller than the regular trichomes. They were much smaller and on the red hairs than the regular trichomes on the rest of the leaf. And what's the difference? And I've never seen anybody name these. So you have capitated stalks and hair trichomes and all of that, but no one has ever named these a separate name, and they're definitely different size. Is there a different composition?
Yeah, they're more like papillae on the lung. So they actually increase the surface area of the stigma. It's actually not the pistil, it's the stigma or the yeah, or the style. In cannabis, it's actually a fused stigma style as one unit, but it's part of the pistil. And what they do is they actually trap pollen grains. So like they're essentially it increases the surface area of the stigmatic surface and allows the pollen grain kind of a little nook at which to kind of catch within. You can kind of think of it like a ball cat, like a
Okay.
baseball glove kind of thing.
Do they contain different cannabinoids than the other trichromes that are obviously much larger?
No, these aren't. I don't think these are. Remember, trichomes are all. There's all sorts of trichomes on plants, and they're not all of them are glandular or produce oils.
I I can
These
say that I've actually collected, like a couple grams of just red hairs, and I tried to get high from them, and it didn't work.
Yeah, these are more designed to help increase the surface area and catch the pollen grains. And there's a liquid that flows from the trichome and the stigmatic surface into the pollen grain that causes the pollen grain to hydrate and germinate like a seed does. And when
Well,
the pollen grain germinate, it sends a pollen tube down into the ovary within the pistil. So
And you
All
get a
right.
seed.
Steven, what you got here? What are these picks? That's sexy.
Yeah, so it's funny. I don't know who was just describing it, but everything they said was pretty spot on. I'm actually glad Marcus is on here too because I follow some of your work. So what got me interested in doing trichome work is when I was at the dispensary, they would slap a label on a product, as soon as it's harvested, and then that shit would sit on the shelf for up to a year. And in my mind, I was like, if you put an apple or any fresh fruit or vegetable on the shelf or any herb, after a year, it's gonna have changes that happen. It won't even be the same fruit. So these pictures are exactly what you were talking about. Your original question was about the stigma. You'll see that at the top of these images kind of sticking out of a plant. Just so you know, this is one single individual bud, like one female reproductive section.
A bract,
Yep, one bract.
calyx, one single calyx.
Yeah,
So
one pistil. It's really the whole pistil of the style, the stigma, and
Right.
the ovary and the bract is one pistil.
yeah, so this is one, kind of like your picture on Chimera's profile picture, where that's a whole cluster or whole inflorescence. This is one individual reproductive section, like where one seed would grow
Yeah, it's
if it
one
got
flower.
pollinated. Yeah,
It's
so
one.
one flower. But all those
This is
different
great.
trichomes you're talking about, which
This,
that,
this is great news. Yeah.
yeah, so this is just one individual flower, but you can see the different types of trichomes. This is all from the same plant. One is at the top of the plant, one is at the middle of the plant, one is at the bottom. The trichome densities are totally different. The types of trichomes are totally different. And even the metabolite profiles are statistically different.
So
So I was just,
excuse me, you read the papers by Malberg and Kim?
by who?
Malberg, Dr. Malberg at Bloomington, Indiana University, and Dr. Kim, his graduate student. They wrote more papers on trichomes than just about anybody else.
No, I hadn't read that one. So I actually got this idea from a Canadian guy, Sam Livingston. So to answer whoever had the original question, Sam Livingston was the first person to look at the differences in trichomes on a physical level, but also on like a genetic level. So are they genetically different or are they the same? And he found out that the bulbous ones, the small ones on the surface, see if I can zoom in. The ones that don't have a stalk are actually precursors to the ones that have stalks. And he knows that because they have a different transcriptome. So they're genetically coded to do different things. So they have different metabolites. They look different, but one is actually the precursor to the other one. So the little bulbs that start on the
Um,
surface, as they grow and produce more cells, those cells essentially become like a platform to raise them off the surface. And that's when we get the stalk trichomes. So yeah, it was pretty interesting going through some of this and realizing like when we see the changes in the plant over the course of its life, it's like an apple tree. If you looked at an apple tree, you wouldn't expect every apple across the tree to mature at the same time. So I just thought it was funny that this inflorescence with tens of thousands of flowers is considered like one product. And that's why, like Etienne said, I got the hell out of the recreational industry and did my research. But I'm back in human performance now, working with athletes to try to get them into something other than just high THC products because they don't know any different. They follow what they're told.
And
right.
Ryan, can you post one of the Malberg and Kim papers? Because there's a whole series of them, and I think you'd find it very interesting.
Stephen,
Yes.
can you talk about the research you're working on now, or is that under wraps?
No, I mean, I could talk about it now. We're just building off of the NFL funding the cannabis and concussion research. The NFL gave a Canadian lab $500,000, which isn't a lot of money in research. And now they're looking at cannabinoids and their neuroprotective benefits that have been documented for what, Etienne, 20 plus years now. Um, but the NFL is getting on the same page with the PTSD, TBIs, any head injuries. They're now looking at the endocannabinoid system. But the NFL is not moving forward with the research. They gave this lab $500,000, and then the NFL said, "Hey, you can't say we didn't give you any money to do it." So now my lab and a bunch of other labs are interested in continuing that work going forward. Because athletes might be the loophole between medical and recreational. Doctors kind of like don't
Yeah.
listen to our anecdotal experience. And then the medical field is like very limited by doctors kind of controlling the narrative. So sports medicine is really important to society. It's how we dictate like healthy blood pressure, healthy heart rate, how much you should work out a week. So there's no reason why cannabinoid science can't obviously jump into sports medicine and,
Can you
pave its own lane.
can you talk about why you're studying anandamide levels and why that matters for concussions? Because the layperson who's watching doesn't really understand what's happening, i.e., with a concussion, much less, kind of dumb it down for people in the sense that can you explain why it matters?
Yeah, so our lab isn't directly looking at anandamide, but what we are looking at is we actually have people, we put on VR, we record data on their brain, and we have them do a task. We'll say something very simple like, hey, use your eyes to track this dot around a virtual room. They do it, and then they go out and do their job, whether they're exposed to explosions, whether they're hitting their head, and then they come back and we have them do the same task they just did an hour ago. And we can detect how poorly they're doing at the task, but we can also see how their brain patterns are actually changing. What's interesting is if you combine that with other data that's coming out of other labs, there are benefits saying that I think CBD is one of them. The CBD may have protective benefits prior to a concussion. I think that's a big deal if you're in one of these sports leagues. So, yeah, that our lab is just interested in looking at the stress before and after an event, and then obviously some type of intervention to prevent that, you know, lack of a loss of function is what we call it.
And
So
that's
it's
a
huge
big
for veterans and sports.
and it's something that we're exposed to exponentially, especially in GWAT veterans, a lot of CTEs due to explosions. And Dr. Meshulam had his own research where he figured if what's called the golden hour, ladies and gentlemen, for those who don't know, if you're when you're hit with a concussion or some sort of serious, as Dr. Meshulam stated, within that hour, you're able to stop that TBI almost intact. It basically stops the brain from swelling, has been found to be the issue. So, certain countries have developed an actual nasal spray that is THC dominant that is actually currently being issued in Israel and the Czech Republic and to other militaries. And I am trying to get that name and that maker actually from our State Department currently so that we can understand because currently there's a nasal spray that's available to our international friendlies that we need to have in our medic packs currently, especially due to the concussive nature of the current realities of the conflicts that we're involved in.
Excellent information.
Yeah,
I would really like to know the name of that product.
Well, you know what? It sounds like very much like what Dr. Brent's lab was working on at the University of Miami there with the exosomes and delivering that 45x payload to the brain. And it was literally for concussions. It was literally to reduce the rate of swelling and inflammation by a massive amount within that golden hour, right? It's like it would be like an EpiPen that you just
Correct.
have on all the fields, that you have in all the bags, that
Correct.
anyone that's in like a concussion danger zone and any type of, for sure,
And
all professional athletes.
It's a
Right.
nasal spray currently so that it's immediately absorbed into the brain tissue, right? So
Yes,
it's absorbed and uptake quickly.
It'd
I'd
be
have
like
to.
heart
Yeah.
patient carrying nitroglycerin pills.
Well, for me, when I fell 20 feet in the concrete and I suffered a severe concussion and, broke my neck in 4 places, when I came to, I ate hash and I was eating hash. And even the doctor said it's probably what saved me from where I am today. Because, I fractured my skull, broke my neck 4 places. My head was like this, right? So it was the cannabis, I believe, that saved my life 100%. Or I'd be a vegetable right now or not thinking properly. That's, as you talk about that, it's a big thing from when I fell in 2005 is me eating hash coming to. I'll never forget that my friends around me and my friend Richie was there and I ate his hash. I just ate it because I couldn't smoke it. So I was just eating the hash. And I mean, I'm here today and I'm a firm believer that is the reason why I don't have, well, they said I had a concussion for 2 years. So,
Yeah.
I'm
If it
saying, you know,
stops the brain swelling, right, you
exactly. Like
literally,
it's really,
yeah.
I truly believe that's why I am who I am, is because cannabis saved my life. I keep saying it every day, right? It's the biggest part of these things that have happened to me. It's always these things that have been helping me, right? So I mean, just resonating talking about that is understanding that this is needed. That when someone suffers a severe head injury or any kind of severe trauma, they need cannabinoids into their system.
Yeah, it
It's like,
should be on.
right?
It should be in the emergency department and all
Yeah.
ambulance.
Like having airbags, right, in a car. There should be airbags related to this, so the CNS is protected while that trauma is happening, right? And that's it's
And
We're we're
John, I
all
think exactly what you're saying is right. I think what's interesting is the fields of like cell biology are changing,
mhm.
right? Because now they're looking at this system. And what's interesting is while we're fighting one battle to try to get veterans and people with, illnesses, there's people in cell biology who are like, hey, this system is 600 million years old.
Exactly.
Which mean so see what I'm saying? Now the sciences are going back to where they used to be, where sciences used to work together to make one strong story before they became physicists are over here, chemists are over here, biologists are over here. That evolutionary story of for some reason 600 million years worth of living things have this system add a lot of oomph behind. It's not just helping these systems. Our
Yeah,
systems have evolved to use these molecules. So I think that is helping kind of merge these conversations forward. And there's
yeah,
obviously still stigma, but like you said about your head injury, like there's so many people with those stories that say the same thing. And even if they don't know how to explain it, they're like, it helped me.
My life. That's why we scream it, right? Everything is what we do here, right? From farmer to freedom, and understand that there's so many different applications, so many different strains for different pains, and how we're utilizing this and what is needed at that trauma level now. And we're not giving those options, and that's why, like, we're all here preaching this, and amen to my heart, to you guys and everybody out there. This is why we do this, because the information is there, and they're hiding it from you, and we're able to actually show you. And there's so many living cases of it around us. It's like they hide it. They want to push you down or anything. You won't get this or that, because it's, well, we're breaking down the walls. I say within the next few years, it's going to be the biggest industry. AI and cannabis. Look out. That's it.
true.
So Stephen, with the work that you're doing, you've come through the academic world. If somebody were watching and they were just getting into science, were interested in what you were doing, what would you recommend they study in school if they went to secondary education?
I think that's the best part. I think all the work that's been done since the 60s, whatever industry you're in right now, I meet people who can essentially not pave their own path, but somebody who's into extraction specifically. I know people who've been doing extractions with other plants for 20 years. And when I told them where cannabis was, they were like, I didn't even know these were opportunities. I talk to people who work in pharmaceutical industry and I'm just like, hey, there's other things that exist. I talk to biologists and they're like, I didn't realize I could research this plant. And I'm like, if you tell your university that it's a plant and you don't lead with I want to study marijuana. Tell them it's cannabis. Tell them you want to study hemp. Get your foot in wherever you can. Ask questions at your school until somebody says, no, we can't do that. In order for me to do my master's research, I got $10,000 from a company to do my work. My chemistry advisor took my money and left me with no advisor. I had to go to another department. See what I'm saying? Like, there is no
Oh
linear
man.
path to what you want to build, but there is a path no matter what your experience is, because we're still building this. Like that's why I don't like the word expert or guru or any of those kind of words. Like
Yeah,
I'm a student. That's what I am,
yeah.
right? So
Or master grower.
Hey, Stephen, can you tell us what school you're at and what's your program you're in?
yeah, so my master's work was at Chicago State University. I was also part of the first legal grow in the city of Chicago when we went recreationally legal. So part of the community college vocational program was that 7 community colleges in the state of Illinois became licensed to grow, manufacture, distribute, and transport marijuana the day that we went recreationally legal. I went to the meeting and said, you all should not do that because you'll lose your FAFSA, but you all can definitely use hemp as a proxy. So I spent a couple years in Illinois helping set that up. I was co-authored on a paper with Cornell University. What Etienne was saying, I started my master's work, my PhD work at NC
Oh, that's
State.
where I've seen your name. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
yeah.
Were
That's,
you
so
on
I
that paper with Seth Crawford, were you?
no, I don't think Seth Crawford. This one was Zach was on it. Larry Smart was on it.
Yeah, maybe you could put
Doc,
the link to it in our chat or in the Hash Church chat. That'd be
yeah,
great.
absolutely. Yeah, so we
Yep.
were, and the paper that we all collaborated on was just talking about how if we're using different words in research and industry, then the research papers can't be applied to an industry specific conversation. So if I'm going to a politician and I'm debating them on industry and I cite some science, well, guess what? If the science says Bract and the industry says Calyx, a good politician or lawyer can be like, well, nope, your argument is void because the science doesn't exactly line up. So
Yeah,
that's
well,
why we
this is why I keep harping on the word strain, right? I mean, Johnny just said different strains for different pains, but the truth is it's like these are all just plants from within a population, and they have traits that vary along a continuum. Right. And so I think that that's like a really interesting way to look at cannabis to consider that all traits exist on a continuum, be it flower size, internode length, trichome gland size, or, the materials that they're made of. All these traits are just existing on a continuum that we can select for through breeding. Right. And so we can change these traits and modify them over generations just through selection. Right. It's one
And
of
I
the
think
amazing.
that's what's so interesting seeing THC being bred to be so high right now. And I know everybody, they're like, oh, minor cannabinoids or whatever word we want to use for any cannabinoid that's not THC. Um, just knowing that, I mean, there's 10 to 12,000 years of a traceable relationship between humans and cultivating this plant. You're talking about near the last ice age humans. That's how long humans have had this involvement with this plant. So, knowing this high THC kind of breeding that's going on now, what I find anecdotally, the veterans that I talk to, they prefer something that's 15 to 20% that smells familiar. Something that's so potent, they go, that smells like apple pie. That smells like dog shit. That smell, whatever it smells like, they prefer 15 to 20 with this very potent smell. And when you learn about the human body, that tracks because our smell is actually one of our most powerful senses. It's more powerful than your eyes, your ears, and everything else. So it makes sense that we've evolved, but it makes you question how much have we bred out and what tiny genetics are still left behind that do possibly have this beneficial value. Because we weren't talking about THC that long ago. I'm only in my mid 30s and I'm still shocked at how much we focus on THC versus you should just be like, do you have some? Let me get some from a guy and it's good. Like,
The
that's it.
entourage effect.
Well, listen, we didn't. I was just saying this the other day. We didn't have THC testing until 2007, right? And terps came even after that. But everything up until that point in time, I mean, how we judged weed was like you stuck your nose in a bag, and that's how you knew if it was good or not, right? It had.
Actually, I had a THC and other cannabinoid uh, testing facility in the very early 1990s.
Yeah. Well, we're not. Yeah,
Yeah, but
no.
you're Sam.
You're Sam. We're talking about the
You're
average.
talking about the rest of us.
We're
Yeah.
Yeah,
talking
but
about
look,
checkers, Mr. Chess.
and look, here's the other thing. When I went, the reason I was like, I want to have respect when I speak publicly on this because there are people that have done work for so long. So I'm like, what machines do they use to actually test these chemicals? Then you find out not everybody's using the right machines. Then you find out some people are using different solvents, and you're like, some papers that people were using, to kind of discredit credible people, you look at the machines they were using, you're like, yo, these methods aren't even credible. Like strong science should have come out and swatted a lot of those old papers, from NIDA and stuff like that. But they didn't because they were well funded. So now we can go back and say, hey, if you're measuring, terpenes with the wrong type of machine, you're gonna burn them off, and the number you get on the back end isn't even valid. So what are you see what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Well, even all the that's why all the numbers from all the old terp. I mean, when Arno started doing his work around the Etienne and I both did a course with Bedrocan and Arno Hazekamp, who was the researcher that was kind of leading the work there. And he did all this work where they were trying to purify standards, and they showed that the standards that are supposed to be 99.9% THC were themselves not actually 99% THC. So like the molecules with which they were calibrating the machines weren't pure, right? Or they weren't at the same purity that they were supposed to be. So all the research that was done really pre, call it 2005, you can't take those numbers as absolute, right? You have to consider that they're it's a range. It's a hint at a story, but what the research showed is definitely not the word of God, right?
Like
Well,
government numbers.
the first thing we did was we tested all of our standards and we double checked with Dr. Brenheisen and Dr. Meshulam and Dr. El Sole. And we found out really quickly that, like you mentioned, you know, pure THC sold by Sigma and the United Nations anti-drug effort, uh, they were listed as 99 point whatever, and they were actually 85.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you guys did the essentially a ring test, right, on the standards. But
Absolutely, that's what
most people didn't even didn't even realize. They just took the number on the label and they decided that was correct. So,
Well, listen,
Come here, tell them what a ring test is for the layman.
so I just
a ring test is where you take a standardized sample and you run it through multiple labs. And what inevitably happens is that the labs most often come back with different results for the same sample. And so what you're doing is you're using a single sample to kind of to challenge all the different labs to determine how accurate or it really tests interlaboratory reliability is what you're doing.
I just pulled out one of these standards that I have in my fridge, and it fell out of the fridge and broke on the ground actually. So I got a lot of terpenes on my ground right now. This has been sitting in for like fucking 15 years. Fuck.
What standard is that one that you're? What does your house smell like, Johnny?
Oh, it smells fucking divine. I've never smelled it before. It's fucking, oh well. So, yeah. And it's sent to my house in like 2012. I also have the THC standards and the Delta 9s and stuff like that. That was what we were running on the GC in the garage.
And Stephen, are you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why I share most of my stuff on
Yeah,
LinkedIn.
I've seen it a bunch of times.
Here, I want to share one other thing with you all, especially because we got Bubble Man on here. So something I was interested in was the quality of the trichomes in the current product that I was consuming. So traditionally, when people look at trichomes under any plant that you look at under a microscope, you usually use ethanol or one of the aldehydes, formaldehydes, so that you can actually take the living organism, the plant, and like freeze it in time. The issue is, guess what happens if you soak a plant in formaldehyde or if you soak it in ethanol? You essentially just did an extraction. So you
Yeah.
disturbed what you wanted to see in its natural shape.
Right.
My research, what I decided to do was instead of soaking it in methanol and ethanol, I compared that to what happens if you take a fresh plant and drop it straight in liquid nitrogen, and then you look at the trichomes. So I compared the same plant, the same location on the plant, and I'll share these images with you all.
Oh, you guys, I wish you guys were here smelling
Wow.
my hand. Oh, that
So
looks
this top image is what happens if you soak trichomes in ethanol, formaldehyde, any of the traditional things you use to look at trichomes. This picture right here was my picture in liquid nitrogen. So what you can do is you can essentially see like this is the closest you're going to see to a living plant, it's trichomes. But the truth is, most of the time when we're consuming the plant, it's been dried or cured or soaked, and the trichomes look like this by the time you actually go to consume it. So what people don't realize is nature is making this picture, right? This picture on the bottom that's nice and organized, looks like a Dr. Seuss kind of acid trip. This picture up here is what happens when humans are processing and curing and when we're
Exactly.
touching, doing different things to the plant. So that was, I mean, one of the aims of my research, but it was one of the most impactful because you got to be able to conceptualize that with your mind whenever you're assessing any product that's given to you. How long has it been dried? How dry is it? Was it dried and cured or just dried? Was it
It,
fresh bubble hash?
it's a
That all
perishable commodity.
right.
Yeah,
So it's
was there
not
a
just
cold
slap the
chain?
label on it.
You know, was there a cold chain? in-
Dr. Malberg and Kim actually took miniature little like needles, syringes, and took out the living material while the plant was alive and and tested each different
Yeah.
after 2 weeks, after 4 weeks, after 8 weeks.
In 2008, I went to the Cannabis Cup in Amsterdam with High Times, and I took this handheld microscope that I found online, and I became a distributor for these microscopes, and I called it the Black Betty. And you could look at the trichromes, and you could look at the underside leaf for spider mites, and and look at their feces on can. So you could look for in eggs. So you could do a survey for spider mite eggs and find out how your indoor grow was doing.
And was that a video camera? Could you
Yeah,
hook it up to a screen?
yeah. You hooked it up to your computer by USB, and you could take video and photographs. And actually, if you look on YouTube, look up spider mite urinates, and it's under uh, MS Bluesman, I think. And so you can see it shows the spider mite crawling across the bottom of a cannabis leaf, and they have a cloaca actually, and he deposits this clear looking fluid behind them. So it's kind
Just
of a
utter and complete disrespect. Not
yeah.
only is he going to fuck up your whole crop, but he's
It's gonna
also just
piss on
pissing and shitting on it.
it.
Oh, oh, that's fucking awesome. Hey,
Yeah.
welcome,
So
Brian. And Wade, Laughter. I see he's off camera, so he might not be here right now, but I wanted to welcome those guys that didn't say hello yet.
Hello. Nice to see you.
Yeah, dude, nice to be seen.
So, Steven, the shots, you dip the plants in liquid nitrogen and put them under an electron microscope? How was that done?
Yeah, so you take a bud from the exact same place. You take one and soak it in ethanol for 30 minutes. Then you soak it in methanol for 30 minutes, and then you soak it in ethanol. So it's an hour
a
and a half.
genius. That's a genius epiphany that you did
What was
that.
that?
It's
So
genius and an epiphany that you did that.
So to be honest, what I was interested in was how do we look at normal plants and treat cannabis the same way that we treat every other plant? And when I found out that we couldn't, because when you look at those plants, you essentially are you suck the life out of them when you soak them in methanol and ethanol. So I was like, I want to cut the plant down and look at it within 60 seconds. Like I want it to be alive. I
Dude, you
dropped it in
just
liquid.
said it. Go ahead,
What's that?
sorry. Keep going.
Sucking the
I'll
life
get
out of
back to
them?
it. Well, just that's what alcohol does when you consume it. It does an extraction on your soul and it sucks the life out of you.
Yep. So that literally, I mean, those images showed like when you leave the plant in that alcohol the same amount of time, like it's distorted. It is not how it was. It's not how nature made it, is the most objective way I can say. So my goal was to see what nature does with trichomes. So I cut the plants, I put them in liquid nitrogen into a bowl. I essentially let the temperature drop as low as it can go, put them in a brass stub, and put them in an electron microscope. What the microscope does exactly, imagine this can is like a beam. It electrocutes this can on both sides and shoots like a cosmic ray straight into the sample that I'm looking at. And it doesn't use lights. That is called an electron microscope because that image that I showed you is not made from lights. It's made from electrons. So it's essentially the closest atomic picture you can get to what nature would make. So if you look at that versus that extraction, we're not consuming what nature has made. We're consuming something that humans have gone through and manipulated.
Well, ones that don't understand the cold chain, right? Like I knew you were going to say liquid nitrogen before you said it, because that's the thing. That's the only thing that you could do to flash freeze that and maintain its integrity. And not only maintain its integrity, instead of leaving, I mean, it's still guaranteed it still leaves some type of a footprint. I not maybe one that we can perceive just yet, but it certainly preserves the aromatic volatiles as well as the integrity of the structure of all these trichomes. It's awesome, dude. Awesome work.
I think one of the coolest things about it is when you use those ethanol and methanol like chemicals, you can actually keep the leaf forever. It never changes anymore. People think that's a good thing. When I'm looking at it under the microscope, the beam that I'm hitting it with is actually thawing it out as I'm looking at it. So I can actually see it as it starts degrading. And I'm like, oh, I just broke the surface of the trichome. Now the trichome head is split. So you can see all that on an atomic level. You can essentially see the degradation process. And I'm like, I don't think we understand like that beautiful plant, versus these end products. I'm like, how much are we processing this? And how much are we blaming the plant for like stuff that we don't understand when products have too much CBN in them, or there's all these different, compounds that people don't understand. So I think the fresh plant itself, the work that you're doing, like that message still has to reign supreme as we kind of put our own fingerprints on it.
Absolutely. And a cold supply chain is super important from start to finish. It's what's the purpose in the processing lab if you're doing, and that's the thing. You're right. Like a lot of stuff is like over processed and over. I created a hashtag years ago called hashtag never touched. It was like that's what I want my hash. I want hashtag never touched. Don't be touching the plants. And I learned that as a macro photographer, the nightmarish hell that is touching or bumping into plants, the releasing and shedding of materials from clothing, like whether it's synthetic fibers or cotton fibers or whatever it is. When you see it under a microscope, it's like, oh my God, it's like a murder scene. It's hard to explain until you spend time in those little areas. But I'll tell you one thing, contamination sticks out like a sore thumb when you get into those super, super close environments that I don't know, it's like you're breaching a wall of perception that you weren't built to perceive. You need some type of
Well, even just a light,
prosthetic.
yeah, even just a light microscope. I mean, when I was working down at NAPRO, we did intake we used to go and do intake days at the dispensaries, and you'd have like 100 growers would show up, and they'd roll into the back room, and I'd have the light microscope set up, and they'd be going on about organic living soil and this and that and the other thing, and I'd put their butt underneath the microscope, and I'd say, "Do you have a black dog?" Right?
Oh, that's the worst.
You could see it, but we had this thing Mark used to call MPMH, which was essentially minimally processed, minimally handled, which is what you're talking about, Mark. It's the
Yeah.
never handled, right?
Hashtag never touched.
Yeah, but it's a philosophy, and I really, someone asked me the other day, I prefer fresh cannabis to cured cannabis, right? Like I just do. Like I find it has more flavor. Sure, there's certain varieties that are like, these 7% high terpinolene varieties that you might want to mellow them a little bit out with curing, but typically I prefer fresh. I think fresh is best.
I
It's
prefer cured.
It's rather surprising that the industries currently don't understand the cold chain of custody, which is a real reality, especially in processed cannabis, which is really bizarre because, i.e., it comes from the ABC, the Alcohol Bureau, basically were the ones who regulated here in California, and they have a cold chain of custody for their beer all the way through to when you buy it at the store.
Yeah.
So I
Dude, and
found it
that's a high profit item. They have this for fucking spinach and lettuce, bro, that
correct.
they make pennies on.
But
It's
your
not that it's
cannabis
not
in
affordable.
Right, but your cannabis in Canada doesn't come insulated in cold, does it, when it's mailed to you? No.
Only if, no, exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely not. Now, there are people, processing facilities, and we were one of them, that would send it in a cold chain. But the minute it got to the LCBD or the, the
provincial
OCS or
distributor.
the AGLC, the provincial distributors in the different provinces, they weren't required to have a cold chain. So at that point in time, we'd have to get the stores that wanted to buy this stuff. Look, the delivery just happened today. Now, if they decided to, and it was a weekend, it could sit in the warehouse at 30 degrees Celsius over the course of the weekend or long weekend, which happened to me with some of my hash. The picture of my hash looked on the OCS, it literally looked like this, which here, I'll actually change the speaker area so we can. So it looked like white powder, just like that. Pure heads. And by the time people got it, it was just like a traditional, very
Oxidized.
dark, fully oxidized. And I told, like, my buddy, not my buddy, but the guy who hit me up for his money back, one of the first people, was like, yeah, it just didn't look like the picture. And I said, well, did it have good flavor? Oh yeah, it was incredible. And did it get you stoned? Oh my God, it was super strong. I'm like, okay. And you dabbed it good and it didn't leave a lot of chaz behind. He's like, no, 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 it was great. I said, okay, so it's just, he's like, yeah, man. I mean, I bought one thing and got the other. And I said, all right, well, I'll give you your money back. But it is incredible that you just told me that nothing else changed other than the fact that it looked different. Okay.
Yeah, I did. We made a bunch of fresh fro, you know, lyophilized resin, like, water hash that we freeze dried. And I had to, it was fine if you kept it in the freezer, but I had to move the stash across when I moved back east. I had to move it back east and it all self-pressed, just being in the fridge, right under its own weight. When it's that quality, it's
You need to get you a baller fridge, also known as a makeup fridge, on Amazon. 2 layers of nice 32-degree Fahrenheit temperature for my hashish
Do they have a
at all
big one?
times. They have bigger ones and they have smaller ones. Absolutely. If you want to roll with some kgs, they got your back for sure. You can get upright ones that look like fridges. They have all sorts of them, but it's a great idea. I like it. You plug it in wherever you get to where you're going, so you're not like just going through batteries like crazy. I think the battery is like a 3-hour battery, which is fine. I have it plugged in my vehicle. I have it plugged in wherever I get to. So it's really these short stints of from A to B that I need the battery to work. And it hasn't let me down yet. Yeah, it's cool. The old makeup fridge.
But this is
Gotta
what you
preserve
need
those
to have
terps.
to have fresh product, right?
Well, every time I walk into a dispensary and it smells like cannabis, I say to them, I say, wow, it smells great in here. And they're like, yeah, it does. I said, that would be nice if it was on the plant matter that people were purchasing instead of in the air. Wouldn't that be nice? It's kind of like,
right.
Yeah, they don't realize it's evaporated and that's what they're smelling.
listen, the best cannabis dispensary has a zero cannabis smell. It's like, and unless you had a room, I mean, ideally for me, I always think it would be great to be able to smell product and look at product. I think that's a huge part of cannabis. I always loved it about Amsterdam. I didn't personally think it was overly dirty. Maybe it is, I don't know. But I love the idea of being able to like at least look and smell the flower. I guess you can't really touch it and get your grubby hands on there, but
Yeah.
it's you can do it to fruit at the grocery store. Like you can pick up a watermelon or an orange, or like I get it. Orange has a peel,
Anybody can touch your fruit. It's so funny.
right?
Working in health and wellness. I look at the nutrition and supplement section in like GNC and Vitamin Shop and how loosely that is and how dangerous some of that stuff is. And then I look at our fruits and vegetables in the grocery store and the fact that any of us can just walk up to them exposed, and then you get in a dispensary and it's just like, how dare you ask to look at this plant? Like, how dare you want to smell that? You want to smell this product? Are you,
Well,
you know what I mean? I can go a vitamin shop and they can sell you, make your heart explode right now, pretty much unregulated. So I'm just like,
yeah, it's
Dude,
two
you
sides
could go buy
of
a
the same coin,
55-gallon barrel of Jack Daniels at the liquor store right now. That's the truth of the matter, and enough to kill all of us here in chat.
no questions asked. You go ahead and have a great day.
It's two sides of the same coin. I mean, Arno, again, that was another study that Arno did. They went to all these not dispensaries, coffee shops all over Holland,
and sent flowers they acquired there to the lab, and there was all sorts of nasty stuff on the flower, including E. coli.
Oh yeah, I
People
believe it.
sticking their nose in the jars. You should be able to smell the jar, or you should be able to smell a sample of the jar, but you don't
Right.
need to stick your your
No,
influenza nose in the entire supply for the next
it's
day.
it's
Yeah,
definitely true. No,
yeah,
well,
right.
If
like I
you go
said,
sell perfume, they have
there's
one perfume
levels to
bottle
it.
that's open and the rest are all closed. Just give
I
me
mean,
one bottle. Yeah.
honestly,
Exactly.
some of the over-regulation of cannabis, some of it I wouldn't mind seeing applied to our air, water, and food. I really wouldn't.
Yeah.
Well, in that sense, cannabis is leading the charge. I mean, what other crop do we know that level of breakdown of what's on the product, right?
Right.
Well, I hope it could inspire us to release the unnecessary regulations that are bogging it down, but also to have the parts that are necessary be contagious to water and air and food. Probably the three most important vectors for disease and the perishability of a human being.
What you're
Seems like we
saying,
should, yeah,
what you're saying is the plant is teaching the human.
absolutely.
Yeah, in a way.
Well, and now we
Listen,
know
I
how to
picked up some.
listen, right?
Listen, I picked up some cilantro the other day, yesterday, and it was like in perfect shape, and it had been flown in from Mexico, right? Like, why can't we have
First
that
class.
I don't know if it was first class, but it was definitely under cold chain,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And yeah, it's weird. It's like there's so much still that we haven't developed within this industry, and like you're saying, these other industries could also develop from what we're learning in cannabis and the regulations that we're not the regulations, but the what those testing is teaching us about the products, right?
Well, the cannabis plant has changed medicine because there were several things that I was taught in medicine that the plant has refuted. We were taught that nerve conduction only goes from the brain out to the periphery, and except for the sensory nerves, does not go backwards. And the plant has the science of the cannabis plant has proven that there's retrograde transmission or inhibition of synaptic impulses. So the science of THC has told us that there's messages going backwards to the brain that we didn't know before. We always thought it was antigrade conduction of nervous impulses, but there's retrograde conduction of nerve uh, of nervous impulses. So, for instance, when you have a seizure and your brain is telling your arm or leg to jump up and down, and the cannabis has a way to quiet those sensations that so wait a minute, we're getting too much information here. We can inhibit this transmission and quiet the seizure activity.
That's
Uh,
incredible.
it, that, that, I think that's the coolest part about this. Somebody was like, "Why did I go from learning about the human body to researching the plant back to the human body?" And I said, all the top researchers essentially did that exact thing because for some reason the plants make a similar molecule to what our body makes, and that just so happens that that class of molecules, 35% of all the FDA approved drugs work the same way. So a lot of times when people are like, "Oh, we don't understand THC and CB1 receptors," I'm like, CB1 and CB2 receptors are the same class of receptors that 35% of our drugs target.
So what you said it's really super important because cannabis is going to replace a large amount of the pharmaceutical drugs that they currently use, and it's going to do it with much better mortality morbidity. That's the drug companies can't produce drugs that don't produce mortality morbidity, and cannabis is going to replace these drugs, which will replace their earnings.
which
Truth.
I guess is what they've been fighting for the last. This is literally like one
Well,
of the
they haven't
big.
had to fight it. They've had the laws casually on their side. Now
Well,
they're actively
those are their
lobbying.
tools.
Yeah, because we are now have demonstrated in their studies, Dr. Philpott and others will will also agree that show that there are, and they're coming out monthly that show that where cannabis is legalized medicinally or recreationally, pharma use goes down across the board, and alcohol use also goes down across the board, and
Right.
not by significant numbers. We're talking 30%. And a third is a huge number that they have never had to lobby for in the past. It is gifted to them. Now they have to fight.
For 2030, it's like they say, it's $100 billion industry, the cannabis industry. So it's about ready to kind of flip. They already know that what's happening in the world and what the information that's coming forward. It's a fuel, it's a fiber, it's a medicine, it's everything, right? Think about it. It's a fuel, it's a food, it's a fiber, and it's a medicine. It makes cars. It does. Look at the use of cannabis and hemp and everything. The plant is going to change the world 100%, and it's happening now. I always said it was a 100-year lie with the pharmaceutical industry and stuff like that. With the opioid system, everybody hooked on pharma. We put everybody through all of the fentanyl patches and everything, and then we're starting to realize this isn't needed. That was just a big money grab in a
It's
sense.
a metabolic essential and nutraceutical.
100%. It's I always say it's holistic health, natural healing, cannabinoid therapy. Cannabinoid therapy is what we need. It's not all the other pharmaceutical drugs that are pumping down our throats. And what they did is they didn't legalize cannabis in Canada. They taxed THC. That's what happened here, right? So we have to understand that it's the high THC is what we're looking for. We're looking for those profiles, those terpene profiles. I just broke a cannabinoid terpene on the ground there, and I was like, and you know what? I can tell you, I can't wait to show this. That's it. That vibrations and stuff. I can tell how that's why I'm doing this. This is what helps me.
Just
Right.
blowing out your olfactory with the pure terps, eh? I'm more of a wafter, a little bit of a kind
Yeah,
of
but you know
like
what
keep it
happened
at.
in the
I,
hospital, Mark? This just
I
happened.
remember.
Same thing. When you put
Dude,
those
you're a different breed. I respect our differences. The things
Yeah.
that you do are not things that I can do.
I had a
Marcus, you know what's
Vietnamese.
interesting about you saying the olfactory nerves? You realize the reason our smell is so strong is because every smell has one neuron, essentially. So think about everything you've ever smelled in your life.
olfactory. Yeah.
Your olfactory nerves are the only ones that can work in both directions, like Dr. Allen just said, at the same time. So this is what I said. Humans have superpowers. We just don't quite understand how to explain them.
I
Your
had a I had a patient
I could
once.
be blind. I could be blind, and there could be a rose outside of my house. And if it's just warm enough, and the
Right,
rose is releasing just enough volatile compounds, I
right,
could be blind, but in my nose, I've triggered this whole pathway in my brain to go, you just got the chemicals of a rose in your nose. That's
right,
pretty crazy, and we kind of downplay that, but other animals use that to survive better than their eyes and ears.
right.
Same
I
with
had a patient that told me that he just smelled marijuana and it fixed his back pain. Just smelling it. He didn't have to smoke it. All he had to do was smell it and it would cure his back pain.
that's what happened with me in the hospital when Mark came with the 15 terpenes. When I'm sitting here like this.
And the thing is, as a scientist, right, I go, oh, that's just anecdotal. But then objectively, you go, you know what they do in Japan? They actually tell people to go to the pine forest where
Yeah.
there's high concentrations of alpha pinene in the air,
Yep.
and they have this deep breathing technique. And alpha pinene helps with vasodilation and other different things. And they found
Mental
out that
clarity.
yeah, these people that have depression, they go hiking, A, exercise, but B, they go and do these baths in these pine trees. So it's like somebody might say, oh, smelling something is anecdotal, but then that's
Yeah,
objective. These doctors in Japan are saying, go to the mountains and do this deep breathing because we know it's beneficial.
So I did a lot of research on this because, of course, it took away my pain so dramatically with the purple punch. And what I'm doing here right now is I'm getting certain things. It's like a 3D overrider. It drives the brain so nothing else gets through. So if you're sitting
yes.
down, it gives you a vision, and nothing gets through that, right? And that's why it's so important to standardize cannabis by looking at, I always say, water activity, terpene profile to give patients that true effect. That's all I've been screaming this, Dr. Allen, we've been talking about this for the last
decade, and I was going through all the old chats and stuff like that. I appreciate you.
Yes. We're
this,
still in the infancy of this science.
oh, we're still scratching the surface, and we get to do this together as we get to move forward. And it's just this one thing that happened today as we're talking about this, and that happened. The universe gave me this again. It's like, there it is. It's beautiful. And when we start looking at how cannabis and holistic health, natural healing, ice bath, daily morning walks, incantations, looking at how we can heal ourselves, it's not pharma. Just saying.
Well, send
Maybe
us all
it's a little
link to
bit.
this.
What's that, Dr. Allen?
Send us all a link to this recording.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This will go on my YouTube channel. There's 335 people watching this recording right now.
335 people just shared it. Wow.
Yeah, they're out in the world of Bubble Man's world, and yeah, they're just they're enjoying the conversation. People have been absolutely enjoying the conversation. It's always nice to go deep and get into the science of some of these conversations.
When you started talking about all those old patents and stuff like that, and I created that little GTP, and I've been kind of digging into that. Wow, I can't believe just the amount of stuff that I had no idea, because it's so hard.
Well, that's what this show is going to be all about, Johnny B. That Dr. Allen and I are going to be doing. We'll have to get a contact for you, Stephen, as well, and get back to you and see if you want to be a part of the Cannabis Journal Club. We'll start creating. If you have people that you think would be brilliant for such a thing, hook me up with them. bcbubbleman@icloud.com, and hopefully we're going to film our first episode here with Dr. Allen and myself in the very, very near future. I want to release it in early New Year and do one a week consistently, and just there. We'll probably be able to use Hash Church as a way to expand on the Cannabis Journal conversations that we have when we want to go deep for hours, because these topics, you certainly can go deep on them for a long period of time. That being said, my own instincts were a little against it when he first said, let's keep it short and concise. And then I thought, no, listen to the good doctor. Like, he has an understanding of this. If you make it too long, people will get lost in it. And there's always going to be the hardcores on Hash Church, 300-400 people, 500 people that want to watch and go deep. But if you want to hit the sort of masses with this information, which is exactly what we want to do, you have to make it very clear and fairly easy to understand. Short.
Yeah. Consume. Yeah.
Hey, I want to say hi to Wade. We haven't heard from Wade yet today. How are you doing, Wade? It's always nice to see you show up on Sunday. He's just turning his headphones off. There he is.
Can you all hear me okay?
All right, Marcus. God bless you guys.
Oh, you should stick around for 2 minutes. Wade always has golden knowledge. And you should meet Wade. Right. Dr. Allen, Wade Laughter, Dr. Allen.
Hello, Dr. Allen. Been enjoying the conversation.
Morning, yeah.
And feeling very distracted. For me personally, in my family and in our circle of animals, the probability of oncoming death or death that has happened is very present for me. For example, my brother, whom I love very much, his stepson died on Christmas of an apparent drug overdose. And I'm really heartbroken for my brother and his family, because now every Christmas going forward will be colored by this event. And meantime, in our circle of animals, we have, there's Lucas. We used to have 3 large dogs at the beginning of this year, whom we loved very much. We now have 1 dog left, and he's been going through some seizures and challenges today. That's why I've been popping in and out of our conversation this morning. So I'm just putting it out there. I know that certainly in the veterans circle, as well as persons who are dealing with health issues this time of year seems to bring forth person's desire to leave this plane and go to another place. And I just think it's worth taking the time to recognize the gift that life is, and how every person, every animal, every creature at some point will come to the end of their life. And what that is like for that person or that being is a lot what Hash Church is about for me. I feel like what we are doing, what Dr. Allen is pointing towards, what Dr. Philpott is pointing towards, is recognizing the part this plant can play in caring for the well-being of humans and the animals that we interact with. And so I guess that's all I have at the moment. I'm just going to go back to listening. I'm really loving the willingness to share expertise and insight that a lot of us have a feeling for, but can't really describe or know what it is we're feeling. I love that idea of a person literally feeling their pain receding at the smell of cannabis. There's a thing there that's very real. So thank you, every one of you, for contributing to the conversation today. And yeah, I'm going to go back to listening and enjoying the life that's being offered here today. Thank you.
Oh,
Yes,
we
we're doing
appreciate you.
God's work.
Appreciate you as always, Wade.
Absolutely.
So
Thank
do
you,
you
Stephen. It's really nice to see you again. And yeah, please do drop in on us occasionally with the Veterans Action Council. Very
Nice.
much appreciate your input and your thoughts.
Definitely
We-
support the veterans. Yeah. So do you guys know what God says about cannabis?
I hope he likes it.
I learned this in prison. I read
Oh,
the Bible.
snap.
I read the Bible 9 times, skin to skin. And the first page of the Bible, in Genesis 1:29, it says, "And God said, I've created every green plant bearing seeds for you, and it shall be for meat." And Romans 14:2 says, "Some may eat all things, others who are weak eat herbs." And Romans 14:3 says, "Let those that eat herbs not despise those that don't, and let those that don't eat herbs not judge those that do." I learned that in prison.
Damn. Just reading the Bible, eh?
Yeah.
Fuck. Tell you.
Some decent stuff in there.
Yep, there definitely is. That's amazing. What was that last one? Those that eat herbs should not despise those that do. That's a killer one.
Those that eat herbs should not despise those that don't, and those that don't eat herbs should not judge those that do.
And what is the title of that?
It's Romans 14:2 and 14:3.
Nice.
And you have to look at in the King James version, because the NIV version changes the word herbs to vegetables.
Oh,
Right.
And so they changed it doesn't make sense if you put the word vegetables in it, but it does make sense if you put the word herbs in it.
That's incredible when you think 14:4, Romans 14:4.
14:2 and 14:3.
I
Oh,
just opened up
14:2
the
and
Bible
14:3.
totally
Very
to that.
cool.
And Genesis 1:29.
Yes, I got the Genesis one. I knew that one. That was like a Jack Harrer. That was
Yeah,
in
we
the
said that on
Empress.
shirts.
Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
I just want to say one thing. I just opened up the Bible to that exact page. Like I just
Awesome.
opened it up. I just went like that, and I'm just like that kind of was kind of well, Romans 14:2. Thank you.
14:2 and 14:3.
I guess I'm supposed to read this because I just picked it up and I opened it up to the Bible, right? So I mean, I just opened up to the exact page as you.
And thanks to Dr. Allen, you did not have to go to prison to learn that.
No, I got to learn that right here, right now. So I appreciate that.
Dude, prison
my dad just gave me this, so.
Oh shit. Well, that's a nice gift from Dad. So were you in prison down south?
And yeah, about
Oh, fuck.
45 minutes north of where I live now.
Shit.
And yeah. In Lucedale, Mississippi.
Do you ever just drive by and shoot at the finger?
I want
Hell,
to.
man.
I'm afraid they would get me if I did.
No shit, dude. That is for real.
It
No matter
is
how few
Mississippi.
of days exactly, dude. No matter how few days you spent there. Listen, my buddy Pedro did time in where was it? I think it was in Deer Creek, Indiana. And it was like the go free for three thing where he got caught by someone, I guess, that got caught and then had to go catch three people. And then he got offered the same thing, but just didn't. He went to jail there. He went back home to Oregon, and while he was back home, they called him back and said, "Oh, hey, we made a mistake. We need you to come back." He also found out that the judge and the prosecutor own the private prison that they send everyone to. So the prosecutor asks for maximum time, and the judge just delivers it every time. And these fucking guys are getting rich off sending people to prison. And my buddy got caught up in it at a fish show. I'm sure they did it for many decades prior on the Grateful Dead tour. Deer Creek, Indiana. I freaked at the creek for all those deadheads out there.
There's actually there used to be a prison company called Whackin' Hut,
Yeah.
and I can't remember what the name is there now. They're a public company and they've rolled into some other public ticker company, but they actually own all three parts of all three aspects of the industrial prison complex, which is the prison system itself, and then they do the policing in what do they call these gated communities? So they have a service that essentially does the policing in the gated communities. And just like you said, Marcus, they're involved on more aspects. So they're involved in essentially entrapping people, and then they profit off of imprisoning them as well.
Yeah, big profits too. It's not small. They get these guys to do labor for like 20 cents an hour or 50 cents an hour, and they pimp out. If you do the math, it's like 100 million or 200 million hours a day of labor that the US pushes into the labor world, and they pay them nothing. It's basically slave labor, and it's the reason why tons of these products are somewhat affordable to be able to make.
Victoria's Secret, Old Navy, Fruit of the
Dude, the list
Loom.
is long, man.
Like it's very long and getting
It's free
longer.
labor. Think of being able to like charge for 200 million hours, at $10 an hour instead of 20. Like that is an insane amount of money.
I went to an equipment auction, a tissue culture auction. There's a company on Vancouver Island called Celfor, and they were dissolving the company, and they had well over $100 million was put into this company, and they were liquidating all these tissue culture assets. And so I went down and I bought a bunch of stuff from them. And as when we were decommissioning the facility, I was learning about their business plan, and they were doing the tissue culture, a process called somatic embryogenesis, where they take callus cells and they coax them into little embryos, and they plate them out on these like clamshell cases, and they'd ship them down by the box to prisons in the States. And they were paying inmates to go through and pull out what they called the PGs, or the plantable germinates, right? That they would take out and put into little cubes and put them into. They would become seedlings for pine tree planting down in the States. But yeah, you'd be surprised at how many different industries tap into that. Forced labor pool, yeah, for lack of a better word. But yeah, there's all sorts of businesses that couldn't work any other way. So they trap the so-called undesirables in society and turn them into slaves, really, is what they're doing.
Yeah, my friend grew tilapia fish in Colorado prisons, and they were selling them to Whole Foods for penny on the dollars as organic fish.
Mouth breeders.
Crazy.
So it's not just
Indeed.
clothing, people. Trees and food too.
Oh yeah. No, it's a massive crime against humanity to open that can of worms is a big one. It's let's stick with our cannabis prohibition for now, and eventually well, thank God for people like the Delices, fighting for prison reform, and people like Steve and his brother there, and the Last Prisoners Project, and many other groups that are just
yeah.
dude, it's like The worst thing you could do is send an innocent person to prison. That is so fucked up. That's like you have to have the highest level, the highest bar set to create a system that doesn't allow that or allows the least amount of it to happen that's possible instead of the current one that is the opposite.
Right.
Fucked up, man. Very, very fucked up. Well, listen, we got about 20 minutes left, 22 minutes left. I love to do 4-hour hash church. So anything you guys want to talk about is on the table. I appreciate everyone for coming out today and spending time with us. And yeah, we still got over 300 people watching. We started over 3 hours ago. We're just about at the 3.45 mark of the show. So it's been a good one. Great conversations with Dr. David Allen. A little tease on what the show is going to be like in the near future. I'm really stoked that you came on, Stephen. That was awesome, Etienne. Always happy. Listen, Etienne, you can suggest people the week or 2 weeks prior. And like I can plan a show around this shit. I love your last minute shit. Don't get me wrong. Jesus, I sound like my wife right now. But I also like to make a plan. And so I'm always down with making plans. And that is, it's hard for me to plan Hash Church every week when I don't actually have a plan. I do have this traditional Hash Church hash show I want to do on with some Afghani, Moroccan, Lebanese influence. I do want to do the aromatic volatiles with Nick Ziegler and Jeremy Plum and the people who created his equipment there over at Yakima Chief Hops, as well as a whole bunch more. And then I had another show, I think it was the PhD show with Maya Bell and a couple others that I've been speaking with over on Instagram. So that I've got some ideas, but anytime you on the panels, anyone on the panel has an idea for a show, I mean, listen, this is what Hash Church is for. This is your space to do so as you would wish. It's always hard because you want to produce magic. You want it to just be, it's hard to tap into the most passionate people that also have the ability to articulate what they're passionate about. So I appreciate each and every one of you for checking all those boxes.
Right. Nice.
It's not an easy variety of boxes to get checked, and there's a lot of people that want those boxes to be checked where they aren't checked, and I'll kind of invite them and have a little pre-conversation, but it doesn't always work out. But I'm always looking for new people to come out on Hash Church and blow our minds with new information and education. I think what I would love, if you're willing to, Brian, is we finish this episode off with the Piatella, with you talking about your Piatella method, in fact, if you're willing to do that.
Oh, I'm happy to.
Oh,
Always.
dude, thank you so much. I'm going to put you on speaker so it's you, the main guy. So many people are looking for this information. It's not even funny. And Brian does have some what I would call novel information in regards to helping speed up the cold curing process. For those of you that don't know what Piatella is, this is like a cold cured full melt bubble that Brian has been definitely leading the charge on. Hopefully I could actually play some of your videos while you're talking. I know we did this last week or a week before, but go ahead. Tell us about the process for doing Piatella.
Well, you want to kind of go like right from the beginning. Excuse me. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah, because when you and I spoke, we spoke on what I would call the first whip or the pre-whip. I think that's pretty important to get the melt moving around. I guess to really start off, it would be to mention that this is going to be your most Percy batch or a fraction of your hash pull. So this will be, for me, typically first or second pull 90 or first or second pull 120. So, a good reason to separate the micron sets if you're trying to make this type of hash. I like those separate two sets in particular. But basically,
dude, that's a hugely important thing that you just mentioned. For those of you that are, first of all, you have to grow, even starting before where Brian mentioned, First of all, you have to have an incredible understanding of growing cannabis and the understanding of how you can push or allow, facilitate, whatever you want to call it, cannabis to express itself to almost, if not the maximum of its capabilities. Meaning all the gene synthases that are there that are turned on are expressing at full power, where you get the most incredible aromatics. You get what is basically called 6-star bubble hash. That is super important. But what Brian mentioned in regards to your first pulls, the micron sizes, make a point on writing that down, because that is hugely important. And if you don't do that, your magic could get locked into, some not so magic. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, just very important. We have 4 different pulls off each wash is where we're at this point. And the timing can vary a little bit, but basically to go back to it, you want to use your very best fraction of your wash to go into this style. So what I would suggest then is basically where I've only been using a freeze dryer over here myself and over here with us for just over a year, like a year and a half. And at this point, going freeze dry instead of air dry, but straight out of the freeze dryer basically goes right to the jar and get that melt, your Perseus fraction warmed up. And if you did need like a little bit of a boost to warm it up, if you're in a cold environment, I would suggest like right on top. We're small batch, so I'll do some small batch quick applications for things or trying things out. A seed mat is a good idea where you could control the heat, I guess, from 80 to 100. I wouldn't go too much warmer than like the 100 under, on the bottom of the jar. The rosin press kind of temps out where I press low. When I press at 160 and maybe up to 170 for a grainy resin. So a warm kind of burst up from the bottom on top of the press for a couple of buckets of hash, where I'll just watch the hash very closely to where the point where the melt goes from a white powder form into a melted down form substance, where I'll try to feed in some stuff to Marcus also as we talk about it more for like the different phases I was thinking, and where we could point things out and say like, this is what I'm actually talking about. But basically white powder melts down to your kind of hash goo, your melted looking hash. And at that point, when you get the melt on off of the powder to the goo, the melty melts down in the bucket, then you want to give it some action. You want to start stirring it around, moving it, turning it. And really, I go towards breeding, for the hash that I'm making. A lot of it is what I would call a greasy resin by nature, meaning like by genetic nature. So I don't really see where you could push a stiff, grainy resin by genetic nature necessarily into this kind of greasy whip up. But then that's because I'm low technology and more high technique. So with the technique based, movement or formations, I'm actually going for a no BS back to the genetics, to where the genetics with the proper cultivation organically, really for the speaking of the terpenes all the way brought to full finish, just some other aspects in where it's just not as easy to just whip the hash. It's got to be a greasy type. It's got to be the Percy fraction. The technique behind it with that kind of genetic lineage and knowledge of that would be applied to make this, the greasiest best hash for this Piatella or cured melt form. And yeah, kind of pre-whip. That's your first whip. There's a lot of info to it, Marcus, but after that, basically what I'm looking to do is just get it warmed up, whip it up. Don't keep the heat on it. Once it's whipped up and kind of, all the way liquid or very, what would you say, viscous or turning easily, whipping easily, that's when I would, lid the jar, vac seal, lid the jar if you have that, capability to make these devices now. But either way, tight seal, tight close on the jar. And I like to bring it to about anywhere from a 60 to 70 Fahrenheit, basically cure. And that's going to be like dark and dry. So it'll be a dry environment, but in the jar, so 60 to 70. And excuse me, the really greasy ones are these strains that want to make hash. Well, this one does this actually from the addition of the gas mask side onto the GMO, where GMO is kind of grainy. The gas mask that I've been kind of playing with for 5 or 6 years, did a back cross 4 this last summer, getting it to a point where, I can even have the male side adding kind of a stable hash breeder line for my own purposes, to where I can add that gas mask sign into a grainy resin, grainy plant type, and in the right pheno get a result where after I do the first whip, it might only take a few days at that temperature setting, or often I'll even ride it out for about 2 weeks. It could be ready at about the week and stiffen up off that shiny, sticky look in the jar after your first whipping. So what you're looking for it to do is come back to a stiffened up look, which might even look kind of dry to you at first once it's stiffened up. But then if you're to let it go about a week further, it'll pop up the terps will influence the cannabinoids, or the resin, excuse me, the dance that goes on in the jar between, the resin and the terpenes, and how you've actually touched them with your hand or with a tool, using a tool. But the human input side of it in that chemistry basically will, push it forward to a point with that little bit of warmth, softening it up to where you're going to bring it to a stiffened up state.
And so at what point do you wrap in cellophane? Because most people are creating their piatella in a cellophane. You're doing yours in jars.
It was kind of like interesting. And in a way, I found it like super interesting, where when I was posting any of these piatella things, and the comments would often be, one of the first hits would be, or several would be, about the plastic. Like, what is that you're using? What kind of plastic? When do put it? So I think it's a thing where the plastic's important. I myself, we just cut turkey bag, like, high quality food grade turkey bag, cut to size. Right there, you can see it. And I'm not even putting the plastic on myself until the very last step, which would be the formation of these little slabs.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
But yet still, because one of the things that always kind of crushed my soul about piatella was that you had basically, what you were doing is you were sealing all the volatile aromatics. They're trying to get out. They're boiling out of the hash. They foam the hash up, right? Even if you don't do the whipping process that you did. I noticed that before it was water, when we'd leave water in water hash that was wet looked very similar to piatella back in the day. We'd call it like, oh, it's kind of buttered out, it's wet, it's got moisture in it. The water would try to get out and it would foam up the hash. I see that happening with aromatic volatiles in piatella. But what I saw time and time again, every time it was opened, the excitement was massive. I'd be at like Lorenzo's place at Terps Army, and he'd be opening up a big like 100-gram bar of piatella that just arrived, and it was just sweating, and there was just like so many of the volatile aromatics were on the outside of the cellophane, and everyone's like, oh, that's amazing. And what do you think of that, Bubble Man? And I was like, well, it's cool, but it's like, man, that's a lot of aromatic volatiles that have been removed from that hash. And I get from the smoker's perspective, they're opening it and they're smelling it like it's the strongest smell they've ever had, because now they figured out a way to like almost extract these aromatics and concentrate them into a way where, let's just be honest, most of the time you don't see droplets of liquid on your hash. So I like the idea. I've never said no to piatella, but boy, am I ever about scraping that cellophane at the end of the session, man. I am not leaving that behind. That is important to me. So thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's pretty darn important that people, the bottom line is, it's like the Skunkman Sam static technique. Unless you have the fire, it's not going to shine for you the way the pictures that I just showed. Like, Brian's doing everything right to end up with hash that looks like that. So, but don't be discouraged if you go down that pathway and you don't end up getting what you just saw. That opens up questions. And if those questions take you down deep pathways, that is how you learn. So don't be afraid of these long, if you're going to want to get into wanting to know how to do stuff like that, to me, that's a multi-decade journey. Doesn't mean you can't hit it. I mean, shit, when I started selling bubble bags, some people would send me pictures, some people would send me little bits of their hash. I'd be like, hey, is this good? Like, did I do a good job? And I'd be like, dude, you literally just made some of the best hash in the entire world, and you're just a fucking random dude in Baltimore or wherever, right? It was always just random places, mostly Americans in the early days that would just I'd be like, dude, you're in like a super short list of like, and who were these people? Well, they were just people who were knew how to grow good cannabis. They either had good access to genetics and maybe a good mentor that was teaching them some things. For whatever reason, they put one and one and one together and came up with like 18 instead of 3. And
Yeah.
that's how you get, for those of you that just watched that, that is no small feat. And I would personally like to give Brian a standing ovation for that hash. From me, the Bubble Man, to you. That's a standing ovation on Hash Church right there, dude. Holy shit. My mouth was watering the whole time. And who's to say that smelling cannabis can't be healing? I know when I'm starving, like hangry, and I smell great home cooked food, I swear I can smell the love that my wife puts into cooking that food. My hunger dissipates just a little bit when I smell food. So if my
I
hunger can dissipate a little when I smell food, so too can my pain. Go ahead, Etienne.
oh shit, my
Oh,
brain
sorry, brother.
cramped. It's
I'm
okay.
sorry. I
No,
like
no,
to
no, no, no,
try.
no. I stepped on you. What were you saying?
I was saying that if you can smell food and reduce your hunger, you can certainly smell cannabis and reduce your pain. There's a lot going on in the olfactory that we don't know. I've had a very love-hate relationship with my olfactory because it is from another planet. It is super duper sensitive. My wife only understood it the 3 times she got pregnant, and her sense of smell went through the roof, which I'm sure is probably for many important reasons. Smelling bad things without even understanding the science behind them keeps the baby safe. And I've lived with it for my entire life, and people are like, "That's amazing that you could smell so deeply and so strongly." And I'm like, I always like to remind people there are many more bad smells in the world than there are good. So yeah, you got to kind of navigate that when you have a very powerful olfactory. Like I've said on the show before, when I landed in New Delhi, India, I almost passed out unconscious. I had never smelt anything, and this is not an insult, first of all, to India. I loved India. It was an amazing place. I found it, I would go back and spend many, many months there, but it was the most unbelievably foul smell I had ever smelt in my life. And it was every bad smell I had ever smelt in my life, all combined into one bad smell. Um, it was pretty intense, no doubt about it.
I personally find Bombay a worse smell than Delhi.
I was in Bombay, but I didn't really leave and go out in. I just was, it was short. I was in Calcutta very short as well. And I've also heard that that is the fact of the matter. But Delhi is still a close second for absolute destruction
I
of the
I think I've
olfactory.
mentioned before, I had friends who flew in from California, landed in Bombay, got in a taxi, made it about a mile or two away from the airport, went back to the airport and left.
Damn. Well, that wasn't me. I got on a train and went to Haridwar and spent a month at the Maha Kumbh Mela smoking Nepalese hash with sadhu babas on the banks of the Ganges. And
Hell,
let me tell you, it was pretty fun. I am not gonna lie. Shout out to Pashupati, the homie that I smoked almost all my hash with while I was there. Here we are in a Shivite temple just north of Haridwar. And good dude. Good dude. He spoke like 50 languages. And in this picture, he's looking very bereft because I'm taking a picture with an actual film camera, but it was the year they came out with these little remote controls that would slide off the side of the camera. And so I was taking a picture with a remote control. So you can see it in his eyes. He's like, what fucking madness is this? What is going on? Anyway, I smoked a ton of hash with that guy. Really good dude. Quite enjoyable. Boom. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming out. If anyone has anything they want to finish it off with, they're welcome to speak now or at least till Sunday. Hold your peace. We'll be back again next year. I'll see you all in about a year. We'll get
Yeah.
back on the horn, and next year we'll have Cannabis Journal Club coming out on the channel. That'll be a membership only show. We have like 80 members now, so I'm pretty stoked on that. We will make the information available after a certain amount of time. It won't stay member locked forever. We want people to be exposed to it, but for those that want to pay a small price, they'll be able to get that information right away. In the meantime, thank everyone for watching today. I think we still have over 300 people. 314 people watching. Want to thank Lord Sav and John Maddox and Bubble Magic and Monkey and Carol LEDs, Robert down in Spain, who said he's been feeding his cows kilos of skunk #1 trim for quite some time. So for anyone that wants to go down to Spain and get the proper dairy products from Robert, who knows, maybe even eventually, I don't know if your cows are your friends, if you're slaughtering them and eating them. Do we slaughter and eat our friends? I don't know. This is another conversation for another hash church. Thanks everyone for coming out. May the full melt bless your bowl sooner than later. And we'll see you next year. Peace out, everybody.
Bong rip.
Bong rip.
Remember,